Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I am joined by the Whilce Portacio. How are you today, sir?
Fantastic, fantastic, except for the fact that I'm not in Manila. So,
Oh. Well, it's a nice day out right now in Manila, so I'm looking out my window.
actually, where are you? What area are you? Saan kaya?
I live in Mandaluyong.
Ah,
Yeah, I live in a condo in Mandaluyong. Um, People can now use that information to steal my identity. I'm kidding. My first question is going way back to the beginning. What was the one thing that sparked your love for comics that made you say, I want to do this for the rest of my life?
actually, that's an interesting question because I didn't start my life, my world goals with comics. At this point in time in high school, I was already best friends with Scott Williams.
Mhm.
So he introduced me to his comic book collection. He was a collector before he became a pro. And so imagine in my middle high school years, Scott showing me not Xeroxes, not pictures, but showing me like, original Barry Windsor Smith,
Oh,
and
wow.
Kaluta and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I fell in love with the art there, but I wasn't really a storyteller. Like most art kids don't understand that story is important. It's about just a visual thing. And so I always wanted to get into film. And so I studied and studied film on my own. And then now I'm going to college and, can't afford it, And I'm in San Diego and my big cousin comes over, Ricky, and he goes, "Hey, get all your drawings there and let's go." And he drags me to the Civic Center in San Diego. And this is, the middle, late 80s. And so it was San Diego Comic Con, but it was in this small community center at the time. But it was still big enough. I mean, all the pros went there. It was even back at that point, was the biggest place in town. And Marvel, fortunately for me, had sent all of their editors to actually look for talent. And they grabbed up on my stuff. I met Carl Potts there. And Carl Potts, understood the situation right away that I had no idea what a story was. And so he gave me the 5 C's of cinematography to study and steered me into inking to earn some money while I was figuring out how to tell a story. And once I understood that even in film, that's what was going to happen. They were going to give me that 5 C's of cinematography or something similar. I then understood the real value of comics. See, in film, let's just do a dream thing, like, okay, let's say I'm a top level director, on Scorsese's level or something. Even if I wanted a particular actress, there would be negotiations, right?
Yeah.
And if I wanted a certain location, especially if it was out of the country, there would be lots of conversation, especially about budget, right? Well, comics, there's no such thing. In comics, you're basically God. So anything you want, like drawing myself and girls I was dating at the time in the background, drawing Punisher, but I want to draw Thor, so I draw Thor in the background. Put people's names in the stars, in the night sky.
Drawing Colossus with a Filipino jacket.
Exactly. I could experiment and do all that. And this is the beginning of Easter eggs in comics because we had the freedom. We only have 4 weeks. So there's no way they can catch it and then make me redo it, right? So it was very easy to do that. And so like Jim Lee and I, I forget where it was, but I remember us consciously thinking, because at San Diego, we met Percy, who used to run one of the big comic book stores in Hawaii. And we wanted to go to Hawaii. And so we drew the store in some stories. And we got we got, I think it was 2 trips to Hawaii. And so we started using that again and again, that medium of Easter eggs. Like I said, me drawing Thor and drawing Regine Velasquez.
Yeah.
I needed a reporter once, and using different phrases in Tagalog. It went from doing the cool, popular thing to then connecting with my audience. Because when I first started, my whole audience thought I was either Italian or at least European.
Because of the name.
Yeah, so it was Whilce Portacio. And
I would have thought it would be Portacio.
I could understand that.
Yeah.
Portacio, where does that come from?
Portacio, yeah.
Oh, well, okay. You got to do that. But after I did Colossus, then I had all these kids coming up, asking me if I was Filipino. And you got to understand, I mean, that was like the beginning of us thinking about image, where basically what that really means is we started understanding the power of having an audience, and fortunately for me, then, I got Filipinos, and I don't know if we want to get into it, but I'm a balikbayan. I've been living here for 56 years now.
It's actually my next question. My next question is, as a Filipino who grew up outside of the Philippines, did you seek out Filipino artists for inspiration in your artwork?
I wish I could. I did. Well, yes, I did, but I failed. Because, okay, let me take you back to high school in Hawaii. I'm doing your typical social studies term paper, and hey, you're Filipino, so do the Philippines. And so I break out the encyclopedia and do the census, the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no detail, there's no context, there's no information. And then I asked my parents, asked my titos and titas, and the response always was, bakit gusto mo malalaman yun? Wala naman yun eh, wala. And so I never got anything, So through most of my life, up until my late 40s, when I started to speak Tagalog, and it was only because I started having, I started going, it's a typical guy Pinoy story, balikbayan, you're forced to go on vacation once to the Philippines, you meet a really pretty girl, start a correspondence, and if you have enough money, you go back to the Philippines, and blah, blah, blah. So I started learning Tagalog only in my late 40s, but all the way up into that, I knew nothing at all. I didn't even know what Tagalog was. I didn't know what Monopo was. I barely ever heard Tagalog, ever.
Really?
Really, yeah.
Even from your parents?
Yeah. I found out through the years that our generational parents, and I'm talking about diaspora balikbayans, specifically in the United States, made the collective decision. I'd love to trace back on where it came from, but made the collective decision of not speaking Tagalog to us so that we wouldn't have problems in school, so that we wouldn't tease. And in my case, it worked. I had no problems. But you then have the reverse problem where I have no idea who I am, which is why then, sorry for my balikbayan activist friends, that you have, like the Filipinx thing, they just cannot understand that Tagalog is not, possessive in any way, Yeah.
Tagalog is gender neutral.
Right. And so trying to change the name of the language of the people to reflect gender neutral is a non-consecutor. It's just showing that you're ignorant, right? And that was one of the first things that struck me on what I call at that point in time in my life, my journey to actually figure out who I am, who my Filipino side is, because obviously I knew who I was as an American. There are American stories everywhere. It's easy to assimilate America if you want to. It's everywhere. But there was nothing with Filipino. So I occasionally heard of like Alex Nino. I occasionally heard of like Lino Broca, but there was nowhere to get information. There was nowhere to see that, to see whether the rumors were true, that these were, you know, creative gods. You know, I later eventually found out through different routes, but there was nothing readily out there. So that's always been one of my kicks for the last 20 years as a creator, thinking about all the other diaspora kids who have no access to who we are, because that's one of my biggest things. I mean, I've done the research. Here in the United States, there's 4.2 million balikbayans.
It's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 4.2.
They're all in the Pacific. They're all in the Pacific coast, on the West Coast.
Well, for those budding creatives out there, 4.2 million balikbayans, who a very small percentage of speak Tagalog or Ilocano or anything else. So therefore know very little bit about being Filipino, except lumpia, right? 4.2 in a country of 360. So what those numbers really tell you is, I never believe in conspiracy. That's the easiest tool an enemy can use, you know. That is the real reason why Hollywood doesn't do Filipino stories. It's because
not enough people.
Yeah, I mean, you can maybe get 20% of the audience. So 20% of 4.2 million, that's not going to bankroll your next movie. And so there is no point to that. But because there's 110 in the Philippines, and there are, I argue here, 8 or 11 around the world, you put all of that together, now that's an audience. That is an audience that you know, Hollywood might start to listen to. And the first signs of that is, as you know, Netflix has been in the Philippines for what, 5 years now?
Yeah.
Mining the Philippines, you know? And I have producer friends that told me they got denied because their story wasn't, according to Netflix, Filipino enough, you know? So as a storyteller, it's like, whoa, the audience is prime now. We got Filipino prime, so the audience now wants to hear a Filipino story. And then, you know, you backtrack to a little bit while ago, you know, with the rollout of Trese, and I think that proved it. Our audience is ready. So
our audience is ready.
Our challenge, yeah.
I wonder how the non-Filipino audience takes it, if there's enough support, or if there will be enough support.
I think it's the opportunity to really explore that, because during that period that Trese rolled out, for weeks, I was watching countless video reviews of Trese by non-Filipinos. It became a meme. It became a thing to do, like a challenge. Everybody reviewed Trese, and everybody was floored. Everybody had the same reaction of, wow, this is supernatural and monsters in a new way. This is really cool. Let's explore this. You know, Budjette was right. You know, a supernatural police procedural, right?
Yeah.
You know, Hollywood loves that. Oh, one sentence. Oh, I can see that. I understand that. That's great. That's why Trese was bankrolled, because it was a concept that anybody could understand, any audience can understand.
And they didn't even pull out the manananggal yet.
Yeah, they didn't pull out. You're right. We didn't yet pull out our ace card, and we have more other ace cards there.
Yeah.
You know, so it is prime. It is time, which is I don't know if you'll allow me to say, but our challenge is twofold, and it shows with Trese. One is, now that the audience, even the collective audience, might be willing now to really entertain Filipino stories, one of the problems, and there's two, one of the problems is our production capabilities in Manila is not yet there.
Even Trese wasn't made in Manila.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then look at the, sorry, budget, and I know you, and I'll say this because I know you didn't have any part in this. The what I feel is the debacle of the English version, where you had all these Philams who, again, like me, probably I can guess because I'm a Balikbayan too, that they didn't really speak Tagalog. And so they all, then I could imagine me being one of those people saying, yeah, I'm Filipino, and yeah, I'll just mimic the accent that my titos use when we have handas.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, most of them came out sounding Mexican.
It was funny. I had a whole discussion with my friends about it because we all went to school in the States. It's actually interesting because I'm bilingual, right? I've spoken both English and Tagalog my whole life. Some of my friends are not; they only speak English. But then I realized, like, one of them can speak English and understand English, Tagalog, and Bisaya, and then another one can understand English, Tagalog, and Ifugao, and another one can understand English, Tagalog, and Bicolano. And I'm like, I can't really say I'm more Filipino than they are because while I may speak Tagalog, they understand more dialects than I do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're all talking about that and we were all saying, like, yeah, it sounds Mexican. And then we started challenging each other. We're like, can you do it on command? Can you do the Filipino accent on command? And we're like, we can't. And the only thing that brings it out is if, like, you're talking to your mom for an hour and then you have to say those lines.
Yeah, but also look at it this way, okay? Let's say Netflix bankrolls a anime version of an American IP that is centered in Los Angeles, okay? And for the main version, you have American actors and their accents are off. How would the world react to that?
So what language did you watch it in?
I watched it in Tagalog.
Oh, okay.
I mean, okay, remember they're walking into the train and she needs to talk to San Telmo, right?
Yeah.
So in the English version, can I be alone? Okay, and the voice actress is she can deliver it, but it's kind of a bland response, right? But in the Tagalog version, there's our politeness in there. There's our respect in there. Pwede po ako. I forget exactly what it was, but it was very typical Filipino. Or when the twins' car gets messed up.
Yeah.
The English version is,
oh no, not the car.
Yeah, but in Tagalog, it's like
bad trip.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very unique, and if you are one of those people who are Filipino or another country, and you fell in love with anime, and now you've studied Japanese, right? What were the first words you found out? If you started with Kamen Rider, it was what? It was hentai, right? If it was Fist of the North Star, is Omae wa mo shinteru. And if you were Voltus 5, you remembered the opening song.
Opening song.
Right. If you are new and you fell in love with Your Name, it's most good. I forget what there's that one of the famous songs there. But my point there is, you didn't fall in love and memorize all these English words or this perfect pronunciation of English. You looked for unique things that you could pull out of Japanese that you knew was Japanese. So we learned Ohayo gozaimasu, and arigato and all that stuff. So why are we pushing, in showbiz in the Philippines, falling over ourselves trying to, sound English and not sound unique? Because we have, as you know, we have 10 million colloquials that change every 6 months. So we have all these built-in things. I mean, even simple things like, remember, like I think it was a year ago, when everybody was going, when your food is bad, you're going, "Ay, Japanese yun." Japanese, what? Japanese yun, and you go, well, what do you mean Japanese? Any audience, when they ask that question, you say, oh, well, the Tagalog word for off is panis. And so, instead of saying panis, we say Japanese. Anybody can get that. So you can imagine people around the world wanting to fall in love with Tagalog. And that'll be one of the first things they remember, Japanese.
Yeah.
And
that was my thing with Trese. I was like, I kept going back and forth between the two dubs, and I was like, I wish there was a super colloquial Taglish dub.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, Alexandra would not speak Tagalog so much. I feel like she would be the type of person who would be raised to speak in English, while the rest of them would probably be speaking in Tagalog.
Right, but you're right, Dewey, and I would bet you $1 million that audiences around the world would love that, right, because they don't have to then be a slave of the subtitles.
Except apparently for Amazon, who will be annoyed that we're mixing languages.
But see, again, that's what excites me, because I've done a few things creatively in comics and overall entertainment. But that's what excites me about Philippines, the Philippine concept. There's so many stories, so many myths, so many just everyday colloquialisms, everyday, we're bilingual, trilingual, we adapt ourselves so easily to other cultures, and so there's so many things to do stories about, but we don't do them. And one of my missions is to get Filipino writers over that hump of, let's admit it, a lot of us have this, something bad happens and we find out it's Filipino, oh, kasi.
Yeah, we'll blame ourselves.
Yeah, even if that Filipino was only the assistant, was it Hitler? Imagine Hitler having a Filipino assistant. Kasi si Totoy. We make excuses for Hitler, we have this instant downer look on ourselves. And so we only project out perfect, like Olympic gold medalists, heavyweight, champion boxers, and stuff like that. But we don't put up our, our everyday. And that's one of the things that, if you let me do it, that's one of the things that really hit me later on studying superheroes. There was a time in the world, not only the country in the United States, but the world, where every time you had a guy who was really well learned, right? Let's say, he always stuck pens in his pocket. Yeah. He always wore a collared shirt and glasses of tape over it, and he was always the joke line, right?
Original Peter Parker.
Original, but that's what I was going to say. That Stan Lee saw that in the 60s because he understood history. He understood where these 60s college nerds were coming from. That the World War II ended in the 40s. And so America didn't want all these young 18-year-olds whose only skill was to survive and kill to come back to the United States and not have a job, not have a life. So we started a GI Bill, giving the soldiers credit for housing, for cars, for merchandise, for preferential treatment, jobs and stuff. So it pushed all those up. So that was the beginning of the middle class. So of course, they wanted their kids to be the first in those families to go to college and become someone. And so 40s, 60s, 20 years later, okay, boom. You had all these kids going into college, groomed since they were kids to be the professional and get through college. And so maybe they didn't know how to talk to a girl. Maybe they were social weirdos, right? And so he made a story about a social nerd who became a superhero and could only be, and if you look at it real closely, right? That's the reason for the thing. Yeah. The mask, because he's only snickering and funny when he has the mask on. But when it's just his face, he goes back to being a nerd because he understood that's how actors work. They put on this persona. And so now you look at it, and now kids grow up and want to be what?
A superhero.
A nerd.
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah.
See, so my point there is, see what popular media can do?
That's true. I didn't think about that. You know what's
If you-
interesting to me about the first appearance of Spider-Man, if you really look at it very closely, before his uncle gets killed,
Yeah,
that's the origin of a supervillain.
yeah.
He's this close to being a supervillain.
Right. And if you really, really studied, it's the psychology of the nerd who's been bashed for all this time.
Mm-hmm.
It's now I'm not what you think. I'm better. I'm everything that I thought I was. And so that's why he nonchalantly let the guy go. And that's why Stanley made sure that was the guy who came back and bit him with his uncle.
Yeah.
To bring him whooshing back into reality, getting away from, I mean, because that's what happens to all of us, quote unquote, downtrodden groups. Once you get out of that, you don't ever want to go back in it. So you have this opposite negative reaction to that. And it takes a while for you to come down. But anyways, America has always done that. We've always taken our stereotypes, and here's a truism of characters in story. Remember that thing of never judge a book by its cover?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's true. That comes from people. The way a person reacts to when you first see them, or if you see them every now and then only, that's only their cover. That's only them responding to overall society. But whenever you get to know any of these people, what happens? You find out there's a reason, there's a backstory. They were an activist at UP, and he got his girlfriend pregnant, and he promised to marry her, and she's happy because she thought he was gonna disown her. And then he goes, okay, I gotta go off to a rally. And then she goes, sumunod ako. And he finds out at the end of the day she did, but she got trampled and killed with the baby. And so now he's like, fuck social, fuck the world. It's gonna be messed up anyways. There's nothing we can do about it. And so, you transpose 40 years later, and he's a guy,
bitter man.
Yeah. So that's what the United States' conscience has always done. It's taken our stereotypes and gave them context, let them go into different places, give them better circumstances. We've never done that in the Philippines.
Interesting. That's true. Now I'm thinking about what our stereotypes even are. There's the lasanguero.
Well, actually, you know what? If you go back to early show, well, not early showbiz, the time of like sila Dolphy.
Yeah.
If you remember Dolphy and Panchito, they weren't the rich boys.
No.
They were those characters.
Yeah.
But they showed you that, like especially Dolphy, like with his TV series and stuff.
Yeah.
He was that, okay, like millennial audience would have problems with, some of his antics and the way he thought of women and stuff like that. But you saw through it that he was this other person, that he was just rough on the side. And if you look at like Eddie Garcia, the same thing. If you look at the beginnings of Shawi and Nora Noor, again, they were like street urchins. They were like, tomboys. They were like, everyday people. And because of their personality, they were able to help show the other sides of that, not just the negative chismoso side.
Yeah.
They were able to show who we really were. And around the world, talking to OFWs and diaspora kids, the world loves us. The world loves us. I mean, the world loves my mom. I mean, my mom, wherever she went to work, she was the shoulder to cry at. She was, Nora, are you having a party? Can we come? You know, everybody loves us and that side. So as the world is now entertaining the thought of looking at other entertainment, that's what they're going to be looking for.
The
They're going to be
hospitality,
the normal regulars. They're not going to be looking for the billionaire. They're not going to be looking for the perfect movie star. They're going to be looking for Filipinos. What is Filipino? Because I'm falling in love with Filipino. I really love. I know so many. I won't name names, but this is a beautiful story. There's this lady I met because I was courting her daughter, and so in the mornings I would sit with mom as the daughter went to work, and she'd tell me stories. And I find out this lady in the Philippines used to work for the Red Cross.
Yeah.
So cool. Wow. And she was kind of high up. And then it turns out her husband, this girl's dad, was high up in the military in Marcos.
Oh, wow.
In intelligence. So he was part of the team because there were rumors right after the fact that intelligence must have known about the CIA intelligence banter, right? Well, they did, because they got out before it happened. And they used, the officer program thing. Have you heard that? That our officers can go to Annapolis and study in military institutions, and they could bring their families because it could take a while and stuff. So that's what they did, and they got out of that. Now, the mom worked as a secretary because she wanted low profile, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's just typing, taking phone calls. After 2 years, the owner of the business does all her papers, because not only can she handle the front office, but she's smart. She used to do Red Cross organization stuff, and she was the shoulder to cry on. She kept all his workers happy and satisfied emotionally. And so it was worth him, even when he finds out that she's illegally in the country, and that is a story that goes across so many families in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And so for us to not do or touch on those stories and why those people, those families yearn to go back to the Philippines, even regardless of corruption and stuff like that, there's no place like home. There's no place. My kid, born and raised here. She's 14 the first time she went back home. And for circumstances, we were there for 5 weeks for her first time. When she came back to the US, and this was in Olongapo. So when we came back to the US, she cried for 3 nights in a row.
Oh, wow. She loved it that much.
Yeah. At the third night, I go, oh baby, bakit? What happened? And she goes, I'll say it word for word. She said, I never believed there was a country where people are actually nice. Imagine, she's a 14-year-old kid, teenager, preteen, and American. And she goes back to the Philippines, can't understand anything, nothing makes sense to her. But she has 16 cousins, all college age, taking her by the hand and protecting her.
Yeah, America's not.
Do it. Can that happen here?
No,
can we take a little 14-year-old kid?
Absolutely not. There's no way. There's no way.
But that's a typical story back home, right?
Absolutely. That's a cool story. I think even you don't have to be related to the person. Like sometimes somebody will be like, hey, I have a friend who's coming to visit the Philippines. Can you show that person around? And we'll be like, yeah, we'll show that person around. And then sometimes it can get kind of toxic because sometimes that person is, there are some people who come here and they're kind of racist and they like to treat the locals as if they're lesser. And then like we'll take it, and we have to do better than that, guys. but
see, that's what I mean, because you could argue that I was one of the lucky ones who my dad was quote unquote only a Navy guy, right? And I I climbed up because of my creative talent and became someone and has a good life. Why do I want to look back to the Philippines, which is still technically a third world country, though I know so many people there. It's not a country that has no money. It's
No,
a country that has a ton of money.
it's just not spread out right.
Right. But see, yeah, there's so much. Here's the thing that, as an image guy,
Yeah.
even image guys have things to marvel at. Okay, we've done lots of things, and I've been part of lots of other different situations and stuff. So here I am. Sandy finds out a week before Christmas that I've actually been for weeks in Olongapo, and for the week of
This is Sandy of
Christmas,
Comic Odyssey.
yeah,
Okay.
for the week of Christmas, I'm going to be in Manila. And he goes, "Hoy, I'm gonna." Well, no, that's not Sandy. Sandy's like fine. But Sandy goes, "Hey, I'm opening my Green Hill store in Promenade. You want to open it for me?" And I go, "Sure, go, no." But then I'm going, "Wait a minute, it's only a week, and it's going to be the weekend after Christmas. Ubos ng pera." And I go there, and it's like the old image days. I mean, the whole store is jam packed for 8 hours. And so after that, we're having dinner down at the Japanese restaurants on the first floor, and he brings in a lot of guests. And I meet I believe it was the owner of the Team Manila,
Okay.
the T-shirt company, right?
Yeah.
T-shirt company with its own retail, right? And if I remember right, he noticed that we were doing signed posters and signed books and stuff, and numbered. And I started talking to him about why and how we do that, because the collector's market. And then we both go, "Hey, that might work in T-shirts, And within a month, we're doing one, a signed and numbered T-shirt. It didn't really work out. The audience is different, but in a month, we were trying it out.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to the States. Though you've been here. Imagine me bringing that idea up, even if they really like it. It's years of the lawyers going through.
Will it work? Will it be a profit? Will it be profitable? No.
You can't get things done now in the United States. That's why so many productions are offshore. It's just so hard to do it in the United States, and it costs so much. For me, for an image guy, that excites me about the Philippines. That if I don't know, I know a lot of people, but if I don't know somebody with a subcontract that I need, I'll know somebody who knows somebody, and we could make those deals, and we could try it out. We can experiment.
Let me ask you something about being an image guy, because I asked Leinil this exact same question, Leinil Yu. And I'm going to ask you the same question. Counting only what you've made from drawing interiors and covers, so no IP, no nothing, no licensing, so Mars Ravalos completely out. Are you the most commercially successful Filipino comic book artist of all time? Because Leinil says it's you. I thought it was him because he's worked on more books. But
no, I say it's Leinil, because
his argument was that while he's worked on more books, you were an image guy.
Now see, yeah, but see, if whenever you're doing any kind of business, even just peripherally, that money has to go back. It's not like, the first year that Bill Gates was running and he made a profit of 3 million, that he took that 3 million in and the company kept rolling. No, that's the profits of the company. It's not, they're going to be able to go to the bank and get, operating funds. So you're constantly have to shift all that stuff in there. And that's what that game is. It's rolling the money over carefully, Also, there was, let me see if I can put it delicate. There was a point in time at the heyday of Image, and because I think, Leinil might make the argument with royalties and stuff, but royalties didn't last that long.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I think Roy Allen Martinez got one of the last big royalty checks, but that's when it was already not huge. But it was enough for Roy to buy band equipment and go on tour with his tropa and disappear from us for 8 months. But even that.
Lots of Filipino artists are also Filipino musicians.
But see, even that, where we in Image were making like this stupendous rate, again, we were the owners.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like Todd funneled that into toys.
Yeah.
Jim funneled that in making relationships with Warner so that they can buy Wildstorm. I went into a diabetic coma.
I'm sorry.
No, it was my.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I wasn't going to bring that up.
But see, the point then is, then there was this big dip, and it happened for a while. I would say like 10, 15 years where the rates went like first drastically down, and then in the last 10 years, jum. There's a small percentage where the rates now are where they used to be with the Image guys. But that's only with that top 10. And comics now the comics used to be like, especially when I was with Uncanny, comics used to be a den for anybody creative. So here I am, the X guy. I'm standing next to the guy who is,
let's say Jeff Smith.
No, with okay. Like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay.
At the time, which sold no copies.
Jim Valentino. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But we're all successful in our books, right? Now it's like this class here, where like I would argue I really wouldn't like to be a writer today because you are now a slave of the Writers' Summit. Where that top 5 figures out the concept and then you have to execute. It's not your story. It's not your idea. You have to execute it to the parameters they set.
Unless you're working on a smaller book.
Which is like only 3 or 4 issues. Back in the day, I don't know if people know this, back in the day, Jim and I, at our tail end of being on the X Office, which was our pinnacle, Bob Harris was letting us basically create the story for every other issue. He would come in and say, okay, Whilce, we need Peter to find his brother, Mikhail. Okay, so I do that issue. Then the next one, I could do whatever I want. There was a time where editorial had enough power that it understood that, hey, we're the creatives. We're the creatives that they can trust. So let us loose. Now it's I'm not in that group there. My name's real out there. It's pubbed all over it, but it's not those 5. It's not with those 5. And so I still at this point would be independent. Working for Marvel and DC is, I mean, look at it this way. I was able to get known for doing Storm because of the covers. I was known for being Archangel because of the different ways I did Archangel and sometimes Wolverine and stuff, and then Bishop. Now today, a named artist who only gets like 3 or 4 issues of any book can't get known really for that character.
Because they don't have the longevity on that title.
Yeah, and so think about it in practical terms. That artist today gets known by his name, his or her name, which then goes to only his or her fan base. Me and the Image guys, we had our fan base, but also, okay, 10 years later after X-Men, somebody else is drawing Archangel and the fans love it. And then some of them will say, hey, but you should check out Whilce's Archangel.
Because you were
And
on the
they'll
book long enough to.
Yeah, but
Okay.
and the in is that audience doesn't know who I am and doesn't even care. But I drew Archangel, and maybe I drew it the way they liked it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a way for me to get other fans.
I get it.
The new guys are just their name, so it's whatever they've done and whatever social networking they do, and so they have to get. For most of our careers before Image, we just drew. We just did what we loved. Today, as you know, with all your interviews, you got to be a social guru. You've got to be, you got to do everything. You
have to market yourself.
You have to get up. Yeah, you have to do everything. And the real, if you study artists from whatever field throughout history, it's always been like that. It's always been, we marry somebody who takes care of the family, takes care of the house, and lets us for 24/7 think creatively. Norman Rockwell, one of my gods, he bought a barn, and there's an old story that here he is, Christmas Day, they're opening up presents, and after they open up the presents, Dad stands up with his coffee and he goes back out to the barn right away.
Yeah. You ever hear the story about Roz Kirby making sure that Jack never drove?
No.
Apparently, Jack was just so in his head and creating stuff all the time that while he was driving, he was so distracted. So he was a completely unsafe driver. So Roz was like, I'm driving.
All I know and remember is her tone of voice of Jack, countless times that, we're all standing around there yakking with Jack, and Jack is giving back and forth. And after like 10 hours, Roz goes, Jack, we got to eat. We got to go. Yeah, but see, that is a truism, because you don't, every job, especially creative jobs, you're talking about figuring out problems. I have a problem with this character. I have a loophole in this story. And you can't come up with those ideas 9 to 5. They come at any moment in time. And so I realize I don't go through anxieties of story and creation. And I like I've got this project I can't talk about, but I got this project now where I'm doing a storyboard for next Wednesday. And so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and today, I just barely worked on it. But all those days, I'm thinking about it. I'm just looking at it in my head, just thinking and thinking, but I'm not pushing myself. So tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I can just get down and that's how I've always been.
This is not
It's
a comic? This is not a comic, you said storyboard?
No.
Okay.
That's all I can say. But but see, that's the lifestyle that I'm talking with, for the last year, I've been talking with government, I can say, in the Philippines. And Congress has already approved, we're waiting for Senate now. Congress has already approved 5 billion pesos to help out all of the entertainment industries. So for the first time, they're actually talking about doing some real correction.
I'm hoping it all gets funneled into the correct sources, and
we will see. We will see. The only thing I can tell you is that the budget for me was approved, and that budget is for me next year to teach animation studios IP creation. So we'll see if that happens. Fortunately, all of the politicians I've met, all of the industry people, and I'm talking Macan Erickson, Black Sheep with ABS, Toei Philippines, Toon City. They all understand the need for story education and IP creation in the Philippines. And so I have their ear, and hopefully they really will next year allow me to do that. But and a lot of that is in response to like Trese and Parasite and Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
It's about time. It's about time, and for anybody that understands entertainment product, other than having the skill to do that product, the audience has to want that product, and it seems the world wants our product. And I want to be part of the group that takes Pinoy and brings it beyond. Oh, that means lumpia.
What is your advice for Filipino creators to capitalize on this moment? Because it does seem like we have this huge thing going on right now.
Well, actually, in the next month or so, I'm actually going to do a workshop with comic creators, give back to my field back home, and I specifically want to talk to the writers, and I got like professionals now understand that, and I like the way they put it after talking to me for a while, that yes, there are a lot of stories in the Philippines to tell, but maybe we're not saying them correctly. Maybe we're not saying, and one of the first tests of that is, believe it or not, was I don't know if you know the story of Stone.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you what Stone means to you, and I know that you're working on a. I know that you're bringing Stone back. Yeah.
Well, see, when I went back to the Philippines in '95 and was part of that, and I had no idea. I was just lucky to be renting out a house on Balete in 1995. No, 1996. And so I didn't know how lucky I was, that this was the time of Club Dread, of the E-Heads, of River Maya and Wolfgang and all this stuff, and NU. It was like,
oh, what a great time.
It was, I want to do a movie. I want to do a movie of those times. But here I was, and I was learning about the death of Philippine comics publication. I even met with one or two of the Roses family, and they were telling me what the industry used to be, that it was like 200,000 circulation. And after I confirmed that, I even told Todd, and Todd goes, wow, you think we can get into that market? Because we were already on a downslope in 95, 96. So
the bubble had burst.
Yeah. So to get back even 5,000, 10,000 would have been, crazy. When I was doing in the late 80s, when I was doing Uncanny X-Men, Phil Barr told me that he was selling like 25K, So
I want to point that out to people who might be wondering why you said Phil Barr. You guys might not know this, but Phil Bar's is actually owned by a guy named Phil Barr.
Yeah, Phil Barbosa. He was funny. I mean, I was at San Diego, and this was now big San Diego, and if you've ever met this frail-looking little guy with a huge mustache, clogs, I mean, real clogs that you find on the beach, and just a plain t-shirt and jeans, and he's pulling one of those wire trays, with comics, and he goes, "You want to go Philippines?" I'm going, let me just humor this guy. Yeah, of course, yeah, sure. And I get sent, a first class ticket in Philippine Airlines in the mail. Awesome. I get there, being brought to the VIP suite, with reporters, meeting producers and military people and celebrities. And it was just all this frail little guy. And, I find out he had like 25 stores or something around the Philippines.
That's because
But
Phil is
anyways,
smart and knows that it's not just comics, that he has to get into print and like all of the other publications and the toys and everything.
well, he was also smart too, because the tariff at the time, I believe, was 12 to 14%. So he had a lot of stewardess friends from PAL. And
That's
he
very
found
smart.
out that they were able to, for free, bring in long boxes. So he would actually pay them to bring in long boxes of his comics in.
Very cool. I didn't know that. I learned something today.
Yeah, I can say it now because now it's now the owners are Ivan and
Yeah, ownership changed a while
yeah,
back.
the ownership changed. Yeah, LaSalle kids. But Stone started out as, hey, maybe I could launch a book in the Philippines and do a Philippine-centric story. And so I started learning about manananggals and tikbalangs, and I put that in the story. And then halfway through that, Brian Haberlin found out. Brian Haberlin at the time was an old friend of mine, because I was on the production side of Wildstorm, and he was the production head of Top Cow.
Okay.
And we were both the only computer nerds. So we actually worked together to figure out how to use Photoshop for comics. And so he found out about it, and he goes, hey, why don't we do this with Image? Why don't you shoot for a bigger audience? And so I changed my mind. And when I changed my mind, I consciously understood that I had to change the story. Because if I imagine, and I didn't really write anything down yet, I was still in research at the time, but imagine if I was writing for the Philippines and I'm bringing in a tikbalang. I don't have to introduce the tikbalang.
Yeah.
I just have to make it rain or something, right? Or something, right? And a kid talk about wedding or something, like, right? Okay. There are a lot of different things that, you don't have to explain. But for an international audience, you have to introduce, you have to set up. And a lot of our writing does that. It assumes this is what the audience wants and what the audience knows. And so it doesn't set up. That is arguably why I think a lot of Filipinos, including my wife, love Korean, because they do it by the book. They set up the stories, they set up the characters, they follow through with the themes and stuff. So Korean stories are proxy Filipino stories because they're Asian, even though they're a little bit of a different culturally, they're still much more similar than American.
Also, K-dramas are really addictive.
Well, I would argue it's because of the story. It's because of the story.
They know how to hook you. They know exactly how to hook you.
Well, look at it this way, because again, from somebody who studies this, what was it? It was like, what, 10 years ago when something would come out of Korea and it would be, oh, that's kind of boring. Even 10 years ago, even the popular things coming out of anime and manga, oh, that's great, but damn, that story's hard to, figure out. I mean, I remember us at San Diego with the San Diego Contingent and them buying the laser disc for Macross.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we would go to the hotel room and they have a laser disc player. So they're playing it. So we're watching Macross for the first time. And me and Scott, okay, we're part of the club. And then the Japanese people are there and they're translating for us. Even the Japanese people translating were kind of getting lost in the intricacies. I mean, Japanese stories. I mean, they meander. They get into the details, into the weeds. Well, you look now, and there are a lot of Japanese entertainment now, and especially Korean. Even China has now understood now how now to tell a story. I mean, there's this. I think it was last year, this huge high budgeted Korean sci-fi called Minesweepers. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And it's basically in the future, and there's tons of garbage from spaceships, from past spaceships floating around. And so there's these independent contractors trying to grab technology and selling it off, right? And so there's this one guy, and it's a Korean team, and they're out there, and he's just about, he's cutthroat, just about getting the stuff there. You find out later on he has this backstory where he lost his kid. His kid gets into space, so gets lost in space, and now she's one of the junks out there, but there's millions of them out there. So now you see his motivation and you go, wow, this is great. But the real story is there's this AI robot going around, and it is a bomb. It is a military bomb, and the military loses it. Well, the Korean team finds the bomb, and guess what the form the bomb comes in? A little girl. That's story 101.
Yeah, the thing with Korean dramas that gets me, I realize, is that they all do this, right? Whatever you saw the first time, they're going to show you like 3 more times, except there's an added detail. It's like, oh no, somebody was actually watching them while this was happening, or this thing happened afterwards, which I think is brilliant because it adds layers to the story, but at the same time, it means they can reuse scenes.
Yeah. That's actually a really great point, because I've been scanning Netflix for the last month, and sorry guys, but I can't watch almost all of the American stuff, because okay, like there's this one with $1 Million Baby. What's her name? She's that boxer with Clint Eastwood as a trainer. She won an Oscar. Anyways, yeah. She won an Oscar. So she's one of those like Sigourney Weaver actresses of stature, right? So she's got this space thing. I forget what it's called, but this space thing. It's new on Netflix, and she's the team that has to go to Mars to save the Earth, right? Now, we have the money to do space shots, okay? But TV and cable doesn't have enough money to do every scene, right? So there's a bulk of scenes that have to be just normal relationship people stuff, right? But I don't like most of the writers now, because all of that normal stuff, that's the boring stuff. So it's simple and doesn't fit the story. It's just arbitrary. It's just filler. Like, okay, here, this girl, she's the top person. She's leading the top team. It's got to save the Earth. They're now on the moon, transitioning into the Mars ship to get to Mars. And then Dad on Earth, who is one of the space team managers. So they both have a career in NASA. He has a heart attack. He's in the hospital. 14-year-old girl calls up, gets on the satellite, gets him to give her the satellite phone to talk to Mom on Moon. He goes, Mom, you have to come back. You can't go to Mars. Dad needs you. And this is the first episode. She's not gonna go, okay, I'll come back and end the series. But they go through that. A smart writer would go through it like, okay, we've got to humor the kid because she's emotionally thick. So everybody has looks with each other, as and they're just playing along and hoping that the dad will come in and say, no, this is what your mom has always, this is her dream, and we have to let her do this. She'll be devastated. Okay, that's how you write that. But no, they go with the kid, Mom, you have to come back, and everybody going, yeah. And then Mom going, yeah, no, you're right. I've already decided I'm not going under the mission. And the crew is going, what? And he's going, yeah, I got to go back to my kid. And then Dad gets on the line and goes, no, you can't, hon. This is your dream. And she goes, you're right. Thank you. It's obviously filler. It's obviously filler because they don't have the money to do that the next, and there's so much. I mean, and this is why writing is so important to me, because like, okay, I don't know if you notice on Netflix, I'm not sure if it's on HBO, it's the same thing with other streaming services, but on Netflix, one of the memes right now is grisly murders in the forest. So city cop comes in and investigates. Swedish one, Scandinavian one, British one, Australian one. They all are different stories, brilliantly done with totally different themes and directions, but they all have the same tagline. Okay. The American one is just the tagline. You get my point?
Yeah.
The Swedish one is, okay, let's take that tagline and let's go with it and see where we can go culturally with our society that way. But the American ones are, okay, no, let's just send a detective into the forest and he knows everything. And these are just country bumpkin cops and don't know what the fuck they're doing. And, you know, and the murderer, of course, is the cop, you know. You know, and that's writing. We have the stories, we have the passion, but we just don't yet know how to tell that story. And it's actually very simple how to set that story, but you've got to understand. Like, for instance, a lot of the quote unquote good movies, which are not, in my higher standards, are not good. People say they're good who don't know story because they're complicated, because they have lots of things they want to say. Like there's a movie where they explore how even a good cop can be corrupted and become a bad cop. And in the same story, how the massa doesn't understand the cultural value of history and our historic points. Then they also talk about another story about the haciendas, about, you know, the farmers want to go to Manila, but them disappearing, you know? Now, I'm not
I know the movie you're talking about. I know
Okay,
the
now,
exact movie you're talking about.
It's a brilliant, beautifully filmed movie, but you get lost because there are 3 movies.
There's 3 movies going on in that movie.
And the problem and the reason you don't write
Does
3
it
movies.
Does it involve the Philippine eagle?
Maybe.
Okay.
But see, you don't do that, because what if the audience loves the cop story? When it goes to the hacienda and the little girl, then it's like, oh, come on, get back to the cop thing. Okay, but you can write that. And the way you write that is with a theme. You have to have one major theme, and you have to have all 3 of those points, those stories, weaved into the exact same theme, so that when you go to the other story that you're not really interested in, you don't want to leave that because maybe I might miss something, because I can see how it's related to the cop story. That, if you look through history of movies that are successful, and I define movies that are successful by 10 years later, it's still popular. 20 years later, it's still popular, because there's a lot of, just look through the history of movies. There have been a lot of movies that in their time, because they touched social constructs at the time, were very popular. But 5 years later, when it was a different social time, oh, that was just dreaming stuff. That was just, you know, pie in the sky stuff. That doesn't make any sense. That's not reality. So people forget about that. The stories that last are real and really woven stories. And so that's what you have to have. Let me, and this is part of my workshop. Let me show you how deep this can go if you do it right. And you have to do it this way. Okay. You have to have a story that has an interesting, why should I watch this movie? Oh, well, so there's this orphan farm kid, and he thought all of his life his parents were dead, but then suddenly finds out his dad's alive. Oh, wow, I actually have a family and it's alive. Oh, but he's the worst person in the universe. Okay. Oh, that's kind of interesting. That might be kind of weird, huh? Okay, now then you have to have an emotional hook. Why should I watch this beyond the gimmick, right? Well, this kid finally sees that he has a dad. And yes, he is the worst person in the universe, but he's gonna fuck the world, the universe over, because they've been fucking with him. And he's gonna make sure dad becomes good again, that dad redeems us. He knows he's not gonna let anybody see it. Anybody can understand that story. So there's that emotional hook. Now you have to then, the most important thing, You have to say something. What are you saying? You can't say, oh, it's about love. Love
What about
hurts.
love?
Love's right, exactly. You got to be specific. So in this story, it's redemption. There's always redemption. Now look, okay, redemption. That means you're going from bad, possibly back to good, or you're going from good to bad and possibly back to good, right? Why is the Star Wars universe, okay, you probably guessed it, right? Why is the Star Wars universe dirty? Because it's in the rundown state. It's in the bad state. It used to be pristine, and you can only see that by going to the capital, the Jedi capital, you know, and some of the droids and stuff like that, you know. And then that's why we have the whole hand thing with Anakin and Luke. That's why you have Obi-Wan first in the mountains, then later on, after a couple of movies, Luke on his island hiding away because of they fucked up, and then now they get pulled back to redeem themselves. It's about redemption. It's not about clones. It's not about droids. It's not about lightsabers. It's about that. And if you have your theme, look at everything. That's why Darth has the mask. Everything about it. The theme dictates everything. That's why Han is there. Han's not there because he's cool and he's a young, cool actor. No, he's always had all these just stupid bit roles. Han is there because he's a substitute big brother that Luke never had. That's why we go from Leia to crush to sister, so that he can have the sister that he didn't have. That's why Obi-Wan is the father figure, and then that's why Luke becomes the father figure. And so almost every major decision in Star Wars is because of that. Now here, let me give you the best example I've ever heard. Okay, it's in a story called Peter Pan. Peter Pan is about a kid who doesn't want to grow up, right? And that's why he has Never Never Land. You ever wonder why it's called Never Never Land? Well, it's because of the theme. What the theme is I want to avoid death, but you have to grow up. It's just the human thing. No matter what, you have to grow up. So here you have Peter Pan, who's avoiding death, and now meeting Wendy. Wendy, join us. Don't get old. Don't grow old. Let's go to Never Never Land. Never will we get old. Okay. Now, who's the nemesis? Captain Hook.
Who's old?
Who's old? But see, here's the important thing. He's what's called a clone character. He is Peter Pan, but he's older. So if he's Peter Pan older, and Peter Pan is afraid of death, Captain Hook is an adult. He's closer to death than Peter Pan. So he's more scared than Peter Pan. So how do we visually show that? Well, there's an alligator following him.
With a clock inside.
With a clock inside that's taking his death away, and it already has his hand inside of him, and the alligator is chasing him, eating it bit by bit. Now, that is beautiful because you know what your theme is. Imagine you didn't have a theme and you're just doing it the way everybody else does it. Oh, this would be cool. This would be cool. Let's intellectually do it this way or that way. How do you come up with an alligator with a clock in it if you don't have a theme, right?
You know, one thing that I found out about Peter Pan that I thought was brilliant and supposedly was an accident was in every stage version, and even in like the 2002 movie, I think, the actor who plays Captain Hook is the same exact actor who plays Wendy's dad in every stage version. And then, you know, every time I mentioned that, everyone was like, well, that makes sense. Symbolically, you know, is the old person, blah, blah, blah. But apparently the only reason they did it was because they realized that these two characters would never be in the same scene, and therefore they can pay just one actor. But it works perfectly with the theme because they're the two people who are like forced, you know, like who are old, and one of them's forcing Wendy to grow up, and the other one is Peter Pan's arch nemesis.
And the introduction of the dad is he's the first bad guy, right? Yeah. So, but see, so that's what's lacking in our writing. We have the good stories, but we don't set it up as a theme, right? How many times have you heard, oh, nasan ba yung maganda? Or where's yung pang atwa? Where's the Kenkoy? Where's the Jeprox? Or where's the third spoke? You know, it's that's not how you make characters. You can't just bring somebody in that doesn't mean anything. Every character has to mean something. Okay, and there are only two ways that you bring in characters. One is contrast to the main character. So like if the character is a vigilante hero, who's the first obvious character you bring in? The Joker.
Yeah.
And dictated by that you have a vigilante who is supposed to be bad. It's bad to be a vigilante, but the world is so tough. The world needs a vigilante as a hero. So the villain has to be really, really bad.
So much worse.
Right. And so now, and the reason for that is called contrast. Well, if the Joker is that bad, then Batman actually looks like a hero. Because if you brought Superman in on his origin story, I don't think Batman is a hero. Right? You have to contrast it because you don't want Batman to say, I'm really bad, but I'm kind of good.
And you know, it has to be the Joker too. Like it has to be the Joker.
To be the Joker.
Because if you brought in like Poison Ivy, all of a sudden you're like, why are you fighting the woman who, yeah, she's wrong about it, but she wants to save the environment.
Right. So see, that is what contrast is these you bring in, you look at almost anything. Almost all of the main side characters are just to show you visually who your character is, so that your character doesn't have to say, I'm a nice guy. I'm a good guy and I'll finally figure this out. You have to, that's what it, and then you have to have other characters too. Okay, we're going to Mars. Okay, let's have the space commander who brings in Batman to go into the space program to go to Mars. So he facilitates the plot. Those are the only two characters that you have to have.
You know,
and that's how you write a story with just that.
That's a great segue into my next topic, because in a few days you are releasing Marvel Voices Identity with and you have a story in there with Alyssa Wong, Crash Wong. You're doing Wave with meeting Bishop. I think this is interesting because, you know, you are basically you're the reason Leinil Yu is a comic book artist, and Leinil Yu co-created Wave, and now you're drawing Wave. And it's a nice little circle. How does it feel working on that story with Alyssa?
Oh, it's great. I met her like 2 years ago. I was teaching a composition class at Blizzard, and she came in. They opened it up not just to the storyboard team, but they opened it up to the rest of the company, and she was one of the ones who came in, and I met her. And it's really great to have voices come in, because I'll tell you one thing, that voices that come in that think they know everything or just use that personality, you know, as a defense mechanism, they never get far. Because a real writer is somebody who studies how people talk and react and what they do. Because how do I do a story of X-Men mutants when there are none and nobody has that experience? How do I make that believable? I make that believable by taking all of our little human stories that everybody knows and weave that together into a fantastical story. The more everyday known stories that I use, the more you will love my fantastical character. The less everyday stuff I use, you won't understand and people won't relate. I mean, look, when we were doing the X-Men, there was no blaring posters and stuff in the offices saying, oh, this has to be multicultural, and this has to be, you know, a big tent. And no, we just knew that we were, you know,
that's who you were.
Yeah, it was just who we were. Jim and I were, I remember when Jim and I came into the office, we came into the office at the same time, we were constantly getting interviews going, so what was it like? I mean, what roadblocks were put in front of you as immigrants and Asians? And we go, none, because nobody else wants to do this job. So Marvel was like, happy
Please do this job.
and we could do it on time at the time, so yeah, it's just being able to write based on what you really know. And arguably, especially if you're an immigrant, what you really, really know, hopefully, is your culture. And I don't know Alyssa's story, but it feels like from our conversations that she is the Balikbayan like me on the trip, on the journey, to try to figure out my roots. I think maybe she might have more connections than I had, but it's great when I cherish those creators and I bring them into my network when I find those creators that want to make that journey, because as you know, there are a lot of Balikbayans that don't want to take that journey.
Yeah.
And will fight you tooth and nail and tell you how bad it is and what a waste of time.
I went to college with a girl who like really screamed that she was Filipino a lot of the time. But then when asked about her Filipino culture, she'd always be like, well, I like rice. Okay.
I grew up in Hawaii where to make money, I would like, this is in the 70s. So I would actually like draw bands and write, I would draw lyric sheets basically, right? The lyrics of famous songs and draw the band. But well, I would always gift them to like the beauty queens, because fortunately we had like 2 beauty queens in our, but junior miss, in ours. And one of them was Pinay. But I remember the disappointment in watching the pageant, and they asked her, where she was from, and she said Hawaii.
Oh.
And I knew a lot of Filipino girls that did that.
Yeah.
That said they were Hawaiian, that they weren't Filipino. So, but there is a cultural change now. There are a lot of young kids now that want to explore that. But again, like I said earlier, there's very little material there. And so I'm trying to gather together a lot of creatives, both what I call the Balikbayans or the diasporas, and the back home, the Kababayans. And,
Cool.
Let them partake of my experience. Yeah. And on how to tell a story for an audience to understand and fall in love, because that's what I do, right? I mean, take heroes. I maintain and sustain heroes. So it, our young kids want Filipino heroes. So it's up to us to give it to them.
Did you co-plot this with Alyssa, or did she write it and then you gave input? Or
fortunately, I'm considered old school now, so I was just hired onto the job. But I got a lot of visual input. Again, one of the realities, I don't think they have any problems with me saying that, one of the realities still is Asian characters still have to prove their market. So we have to prove that not only can we get the 4.2 million in the US, but that we can get the Japanese, the Chinese, we can get the whole Asian group. If one character can bring in the whole Asian group, then you have power and you'll be able to make those decisions. But until the audience proves itself, so it's kind of like a catch-22. I mean, they won't let us make the decisions until the audience believes it, but the audience won't believe it until they see it. And but hey, that's everything that we did first in the Punisher office, then the X-Men office, then Image, is we understood the audience. We grabbed them, gave them what they wanted, the way they wanted it, and sucked in that power and used it to fight the big guys. And so That's what I need to convince creatives back home and there. Well, here and back home.
Yeah.
That's the fight that I need to get everybody into. And it's kind of tough, but I think it's worth it because it's time. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants it right now, and so it's going to be fun. There's so many things I wish I could tell you about, but I'll say this so you have ammunition with my wife. In a couple of months, let's do another interview.
Oh yes.
And I'll be able to tell you about some of the stuff that's working underneath. That is, I found the biggest thing. That is the biggest thing. It's weird too because our culture is about connections, right? Bayanihan, all that stuff. But it's weird whether I'm in Manila or whether I'm here in the US. The Filipino community isn't connected. They know of each other, but they don't. I mean, like, think of Weta, think of Peter Jackson, he comes to Hollywood with a Weta reel saying, okay, not only can we film it there, but here's the effects and here's proof that they can do it there. So he takes the Bayanihan spirit and he brings everybody into the deal. He doesn't bring himself into the deal, even though he was the one who made the meeting in Hollywood. He brought them in. And, again, I can't tell you specifics, but every now and then I get a phone call or a message saying, hey, is there this type of actor in the Philippines or actress? Because there's this thing that's being set up right now. And they give me the job order for the part.
No.
We have cute people. Even our bad people are cute people. We have our girls are sweetums. We don't have a big range because producers will tell you those are the only movies that sell. Well, I say that's bonkers, because if the audience is too dumb to understand complicated relationships or concepts, then why are they making box office hits of American and foreign movies? Why are they eating up all these Korean K-dramas and stuff? No, they just want something good. They don't just want rom-coms, but there are only bad rom-coms done. So when you want something, even if it's bad, that's all you got. So that's what you take, right?
Yeah.
But when something good comes around, you grab it. And so that's what's happening with the Korean stuff right now. They're grabbing that stuff and laughing at locally produced stuff. So that's my bet. We're just not doing it right. We're just not writing it right. We're not writing it correctly to our audience, because that's how you get power. Hollywood, you know this. Take 100% out of their movies. What percentage is smart, well-written, well thought-out screenplays?
Less than one.
Right. Okay. And that is why, and the rest, 99%, that is to the masa. It's catering to the masa. That's why they have the movie to make all these other things.
Yeah.
In the Philippines, it's different. We cater to the 99, but then we have like a 25% that writes to this, but writes it so highbrow that the masa can't get it. Well, Charlie Chaplin, Selznick, everybody that's become a major producer, director. I mean, one of the first directors I met in the 90s was Chito Ronyo. And I didn't know of his backlog of work, right? Like in the 80s and the 70s, right? The political dramas and stuff that he did, that he's one of those old school guys. I got there in his heyday of entertainment, where, he was the manager of River Maya,
Yeah.
the manager of the Street Boys. He was, and he took me to the set with, G. Tonji and Mark Fernandez,
That takes me back.
But sitting down with him and talking on the set and stuff, He's a smart, brilliant guy. But he just tells me they won't fund any of my screenplays anymore, even though I win awards and stuff. It doesn't make the money. And I'm old. I'm not going to be scrounging around. I'm not stupid. So he gobbles up what he can because to live his life. You know, there's so much waste. There's so much potential. So much potential. And you can imagine you bring in a real good, I mean, imagine you're able, this is never going to happen, but imagine you're able to bring in a story that J.J. Abrams wants to produce, but you say no. And Netflix has already has a deal on the table because JJ said no. I mean, you said no to JJ and you want to produce it on your own. Who in the Philippines would not jump on that, right? Who would not? You can get Lea Salonga to do the soundtrack. You can get Mr. C to orchestrate the soundtrack. You can get top level professionals who would even probably maybe do a pro bono or for a friendly figure, just to be part of something that looks like it might actually go somewhere and be of real high quality. That's the potential. That's a potential. I mean, imagine the world through our entertainment being introduced to, like, you know, the Four of Spades, to Morissette, to Mora, to, you know, we have talent all over the place. So you imagine some entertainment feature going out there, and these top level people are part of it in different medias, but the world doesn't know that. It's just a new face to them. And the first time Morissette does her squeals,
yeah,
they're gonna go, wow, that's like Beyonce or you know, name your diva out there. They're gonna think it's just this top amateur because they've never heard of her, but they're gonna go, oh wow, and then bring in some real voice talent, bring in some, you know, like I know a lot of the martial arts guys over here, choreographers in Hollywood. They're just waiting for a Pinoy vehicle. So I can so easily set up a martial arts feature in the Philippines and get these guys to come in and bring in Born Entertainment choreography, bring in, you know, what's Keanu's franchise now, you know, and people will be floored. They'll be going, oh, wow, look at this new Filipino thing, and damn, you know, but instead, you know, for all this time, we've been like, oh, well, here's my friend who says he's a director. Here's my friend who says he can do choreography. Nah. You set up a real story, really well written, perfect. Pitch it, say no, but you can say, oh, Steven Spielberg wanted this, but we said no. And then you bring it back home and show somebody it. They'll tell somebody. Show Gary Vee it. He'll tell his wife. His wife will tell Roel Santiago. Roel Santiago will tell John Arcena. He'll tell, and pretty soon, boom, in a week, everybody will know that there's something of quality out there. That's actually how Hollywood runs. Did you know that? That's how screenwriters get the 1 million. It's because their agents spread it around and let everybody read it, but go, but we're not casting right now, but we just wanted to see if you like this. And them going, hey man, there's this role, I got to get this role. And then, you know, and then the production company, you know, oh wow, yeah, we got to get this no matter what. Give them $1 million.
But that, to your point where you say like, oh, I just know this guy who does choreography, maybe I'll get him, that kind of thing. I feel like that's a really Filipino thing, and that we kind of need to get away from, because there's a ceiling to that, right?
No, but see, we do it in the frame of loyalty.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a choreographer, but he's only choreographed Three's Company. They had a bar scene, you know, in this comedy show, you know. No, I know some of the choreographers on, you know, top level shows, the choreographers who were part of the team that did Born Entertainment, part of the team that does Keanu's movies. Those those people are just, they're just itching to get it. I know top level mocap companies that do Star Wars, Mandalorian, Planet of the Apes. The wife is Filipino. She has businesses in Ortigas and Cebu. They're looking to transfer a phase 2 of that studio in because they want to capture Asia. That's not just a somebody, a friend. You know, these are top level. I know for a fact that, because he told me himself, Jay Oliva,
yeah,
he has his studio in LA, but they're what I call a head studio. They write the storyboards, they do the storyboards, they do the designs, and then they ship out to a service, right? He told me he has 4 service companies, animation companies around the world. Now, he's been working with these guys for a long time, but imagine when you're working with 4 separate companies, the headache of keeping them all on point, right?
of course.
Keeping them all drawing everything exactly the same. He told me if there ever was a big studio in the Philippines that could meet his standards, he'd be there in an instant. See, that's my other side of it. That's why I'm working with government and industry, because as you know, Ronnie Del Carmen, he's already got his deal, and it is Pinoy. He told me it is Pinoy. So something will come out, hopefully starting next year. The production will start on that. The budget will start rolling out. Trese, you already know what happened underneath there. Anthony Francisco is still shopping through Disney, another Pinoy, I think. Half Worlds is gonna come out. I've heard different things, talking to different aspects of it, and some other things. My problem is if all, believe it or not, is if all of those are box office hits next year. You know why?
It'll give you competition.
Well, no, all of them will be produced outside of the Philippines.
Okay.
So what's Hollywood going to go? What's Hollywood going to say? Oh, Filipino content. Yes, we make money, but we don't have to do it in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen? Yes, a few creatives might make some money, but they're not going to have the real power because they're not going to have the control. And so after a while, Trese will become, hey, Brad Pitt likes Trese. Let's bring him in. Right? Because, you know, nobody in the Philippines is going to have the power to make those decisions with Netflix. We'll only have the power to pull out of the deal, you know? And so the other part of the card is, well, if I can get that studio for Jay, if I can convince Ronnie that there is a studio capable of doing what he wants to do, or anybody else, and we start showing that the Philippines can get into the pipeline, knows what the pipeline is. And like I say, I know Hollywood players that know what the pipeline is and have that experience and bring him in. You know, like Dave Yu, an old friend of mine from Mothership, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, he's an old special effects guy. He knows how to do all that. He's still in contact with those guys, but he doesn't have the money to expand. Because he tells me he keeps getting jobs where they said, oh, we need 100 shots. You need 100 shots in 4 months. He can't do that with 46 people. You know, so he has to turn those jobs down. So that's the other side of it. As our pitch people, you know, like Eric Calderon, I know he's working with the government and teaching people how to pitch and letting him use his producer contacts in the US to pitch. As those deals start to get through, we got to do that other side and get the production up to speed. Because if everything gets produced out of Hollywood, I mean, out of the Philippines, we're going to become Japan. I don't know if you know Japan's, you know, film history. It's almost basically dead. It's always died and gone up, died and gone up, died and gone up. You know, even though we've had like, you know, Akira Kurosawa and things like Akira and stuff like that, it's because the industry itself is not big enough to maintain itself. But look, I'm close now with Toon City, and Toon City has the capability of expanding to 800 to 1,000 artists. Cool. That's more than capable of handling how many features a year, but they only have enough jobs to hire to keep hiring 200 to 300. And that's just one studio. We have the expansion capability. And there's no way that Jay or I or Ronnie could spend the money or get the investment enough in here in the US to build an 800 artist studio. It's just too expensive. So we need the Philippines, and the Philippines needs us, you know?
I love hearing this so much because I think when Trese came out, there was a lot of talk about locally about how, oh, this is so terrible. Like it's a Filipino piece of work, but it wasn't even animated in the Philippines. And I was like, no, this is good because it highlights the problems that the Filipino animation industry has in the Philippines, and we can finally talk about it because those problems have been around for a long time.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what, like, again, I won't name names, but I had a very good friend who's ensconced in entertainment and politics because he comes from a political family. And I told him, dude, I got production and I've set up with them, and their managers have set up with me. And so I'm going to be able to train some of the top managers there in production, but I want to deal with the writers. And the guy goes, okay, I'll talk around. I'll go to advertising and I'll go to entertainment, and I'll see if I can get some candidates for some of the young writers to see if you can train them, you know, or workshop with them. So I had 2 weeks of meetings set up. The first meeting I had was with young writers. And you know how that goes. I mean, they're really talented, but they're working in industry where they could be fired the next day.
At any given moment.
Right. And so they're not going to say anything bad, right? They're going to blame anybody except the producers, right? And then a funny thing happened a week later. Remember, we had heads giving up candidates for me to interview. The week later, we had the heads putting themselves up.
Okay.
And within 15 minutes of that 2-hour call, they agreed that, yes, we have stories, yes, we have qualified writers, but maybe we're not telling the stories the right way because the audience is not biting, right? How many indie guys have told you, I've sweated and I've bled and I put my movie out there, but nobody wants to watch it? Well, maybe there's a fundamental, basic, simple reason.
You know, I just want to point out to everybody watching that you saying that you know somebody who's in politics and in entertainment doesn't actually narrow the list down in my head. The Venn diagram for those two things in the Philippines is very close to being one circle.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing for me. They're all young kids, all these senators and congressmen. Well, most of them, because they're dynasties, you know.
But that's so great though, because like, so what would you say to young budding creatives now, and in terms of both how to develop their craft and what to watch out for in terms of business? And I'm asking this because my nephew is graduating college soon and he'd like to be creative on some level. So I hope he watches this.
Here's a by words, by terms, a simple wording of the solution, but it's a hard to do thing. You know, like, you know, when you're trying to lose weight, okay, just don't eat as much and exercise more. That's easy to understand, but very hard to do, right? You know, to get the willpower to actually do that and continue to do that. Well, it's kind of the same thing. You got to, like, you have to take an example of image. Okay, we were all young punks.
Mm-hmm.
I think the oldest of us was 21, maybe. Rob, I still think was like still late teens, like 18.
I thought Jim Valentino was slightly older than the rest of you. No?
Jim's always been old.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys know. I mean, we used to always call him, even from the very beginning, the Tasmanian devil. You know, I mean, you know, he's had this shock of hair, and he's always, you know. But he actually was one of the ones who brought us into merchandising. Even back then, even when we joined up together, he actually had merchandising and stuff. So he understood the fundamental of the other thing. But look at what we did. We were just young punks. Marvel was this machine, just, and they think one way, right? And the thing with behemoths like that is they're the last to understand that the audience has changed. And they're so huge, it takes long for them to shift. So that's what happened with us with Marvel and DC. In the fundamental, we started noticing kids wearing our t-shirts, not just one X-Men t-shirt of one of our drawings, but like 10, 12, So some t-shirt company out there was making a lot of money. So we did a research, and that t-shirt company was making $1 million. And it wasn't even a contract with Marvel. It was just pirate. And then we started seeing posters and stuff. And that's why we did ash cans. That's why we did like mini posters. And when we went to Marvel with that, Marvel goes, nah, I don't think the kids want to buy that stuff. I think they just love the comics and will wait 30 days. We're going, a kid wants to wait 30 days? I don't know any kid that would say, yeah, I'll just wait 30 days. Or, okay, is there something every week? And so my point there is we found out really what the audience wanted. It wasn't researched. It was, we actually talked to them. Almost all of our assistants in all our studios were kids of that age. And they were there to, quote unquote, gopher and manage and clean up the place. But no, what they were really there was for, hey, Carl, what do you think of this? Oh, wow, that's so fucking cool. I'm done for the day. So find out what the audience really, really wants. The masa. Then write what you want, but what you want that fits in what they want. Okay?
Yeah.
Then get that audience and then control it. Now you have power. Now you can go, well, okay, ABS won't set us a deal for broadcasting. Okay, let's talk to Jamil. They all have like 10 million subscribers. Let's do a deal with them, and maybe they'll help us promote this thing. Maybe they're comic fans or something like that. And then start putting out there on YouTube. And then when you continually get the millions, you go, ABS, see, we got numbers. And then wait for them to make a deal. If they don't, TV5 will, right? Because TV5 is trying to climb up, right? So get the audience, give the audience what they want. Look at how, what was that show? I keep forgetting the name. Game Boy, right? Remember the pandemic show, the two gay guys on Zoom calls?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, that's the same point. That was a garage effort of just, hey, we're doing Zoom, and so we can't get out. It's pandemic, so let's try this. And then I don't know if later on, then there's this British one with David, who the one of the Doctor Who's,
David Tennant.
David Tennant and this other comedian. They used the same kind of concept. They weren't gay guys, but they used the same concept. They were better filmmakers, but they were doing it through Zoom. Mm-hmm. But and so they got like, I think 2 seasons of that. So my point then is, no matter what's out there, whatever's available to you, go to that audience. Because like, if you know anything about Jamil, they're just 2 young kids who are just like any other kids, Filipino kids out there that used to work at Jollibee. Now they got this multi-million-dollar house. They've got, a Jeep Wrangler. They've got a Mustang, I think. And and they have, I think, 10 to 12 million subscribers, and they vlog every day. And so they get millions every day. Well, you do your guess calculations, how much money they're making every day, every week, and they did it like us. They're millionaires now, but they're still Filipinos, masa, They're not going, okay, now we need an air conditioner, so they go to the high-end Japanese. No, they go to a regular place and they vlog it, and it goes, oh, look, pangalan lang ito, ha? Tingnan mo yung presyo. Taas na. Pangalan lang. Ito, mas maganda. Cheaper pa. They're showing how a masa person rises up. And that's what the whole American market from the 50s, 60s, 70s was. It was our rich people, our actors who became rich, then showing how regular people can now start to live this life, and showing them what just YouTube is great there. Do that. Check out all these Filipino vloggers, and that's what you'll see. You just see regular people talking bakya, talking regular, talking jeprox, talking to each other, to the masa, and them responding to them. Well, that was you guys responding to us an image. And that's the only reason we had the power to do what we did and make the decisions that we made, because of you guys.
Because of the audience.
Yeah, because of the audience. So the audience is there. If I told somebody just recently, a big CEO, that if I didn't have 3 kids, and I just drove the last one yesterday to college for the first year. If I didn't have the 3 kids in my house and my American, stuff, and if I was single, I would be in the Philippines anonymously, churning out some comic books, making deals with Sandy to guerrilla launch with no credits this new line, and just growing this audience. And then once the audience is grown, then I'll come out and say, "Da-da! I'm Wizard of Oz," and then I'll have those numbers. And then I can go to the big families and I can go, see the numbers, see my experience sheet.
I feel like that's what the local comic book industry needs too, is just somebody to guide it.
Well, that's why I've been talking to Paulo here at us. I'm going to do stuff with them. I am going to, if they will let me, I want to train up the writers into speaking to a bigger audience, because that's what we need. We need to talk to the bigger audience, but not cater to the bigger audience, because they want to know what we are. They want to know what is Filipino. I mean, if you doubt that, then explain to me why Netflix has been there for 5 years.
Yeah.
Turning down content that isn't Filipino enough. At least that's what they say. They understand there's a market. There's a market, and I just don't believe, I just think that there's not enough creatives back home that believe that. I mean, how many movies have you seen where it's, "Hoy, Doy, punta tayo, mamaya punta tayo, punta tayo sa ilalim ng tulay." Anong tulay? Yung tulay ng Royal True Orange. And then our friend comes in who's American and goes, what do you guys say? And then you go, "Oh yeah, we're gonna meet at the bridge." Oh yeah, I know all the bridges. Which one? I want to meet there too. And then I turn around after just telling you, yung tulay sa Royal True Orange. And I turn to him and goes, "Yeah, the bridge at Royal True Orange." All of a sudden, I have an American accent, because the American audience won't understand if I use the Filipino accent. Look, you got 5 million people mimicking the Korean accent, the Singaporean accent, the Hong Kong accent.
Oh, the Japanese accent, especially.
Yeah.
Like around here. Like,
yeah.
Just things like when Trese came out, some of these guys, some of the cosplayers did unboxings of the loot bags that Netflix gave out, and some of them were like, "Kurisupin, Bashirio." It's last few questions before Atajo kills me. So you mentioned earlier that characters exist, supporting characters exist to show you who your main character really is. in your estimation, who is Wave and how does Bishop play off of her? And what is it like drawing Bishop after all this time, nearly 30 years later?
It was weird getting used to the new haircut. um, it was a trip. It was a trip because I also then because I'm a fan of Idris Elba. I've always wanted him as Bishop, but of course he can't be because he's older. But he is the way I see Bishop. It was real cool trying to go in between how I used to think about drawing him and how to keep him not totally, totally different. What was, again, like I said, I didn't have much input. I just relied on, because I knew I could depend on Alyssa to keep things in there, so like, her calling her grandpa about oh that's right, it hasn't come out right? No,
it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah,
but she is very close with her grandpa, so
yeah, so there are little things in there, so I trusted her to be able to keep that in there, because it's a new editorial group. Almost all of Marvel and DC are new editorial groups, but I'm happy that I was able to put them together to start that journey, because that's all it takes. It takes a start. If you can't get it started, then you don't have potential to go anywhere. Yeah. It's only a daydream. And so now that it's started, and yes, a lot of it started because I came on board. I mean, it's an obvious, easy thing, right? I did Bishop, so hey, we can put Bishop in there.
Have Whilce draw the Filipino character. Yeah.
Right. So it obviously opens up that door. And now maybe as Philippine content gets more popular again, this is the phase of everybody. We have to prove that we're a market. Prove that a market that will eat up things. So that's why I'm glad there was that meme. Buy it, everybody, huh? Don't pirate it, right? Remember?
For Trese?
Yeah, for Trese.
You know who wrote that?
You?
I did.
Oh, good, cool.
I didn't know that was gonna go. The next thing I knew, it was like 14,000 shares, and I was like, wait, what? What just happened?
But see, that's data points. That tells you, right? That tells you it's time. It's gonna work. So I have no problems that this. I mean, it's only a 5-page story, but it's a real good filling story, because they both meet and they actually do some nice, cute stuff. They don't do. If you ask me, like, what I'd like to have happen, I think I could talk about that because it'll be either near or there, yeah. Right? Well, I would love to do a story where we somehow find out that before Bishop came back, he was fighting with Wave in Days of Future Past. Wouldn't that be so cool? Because from Wave's point of view, it's like, fuck, I survived till Days of Future Past. And then too, the readers go, so how close were they? That he had to come back. So even after the fact, we can do another story later on saying, well, so Bishop, why did you really come to the Philippines where we met the first time? Let me tell you. That again, these are just possibilities here, either near or there. But again, the door is open now. And so if the audience demands it, we could go there if that's what the audience wants, or we can go somewhere else. But the door is now open, and there are capable beyond me, with Alyssa and Greg Pack and even our own. I'd love for Budjette to be able to get a shot at that. But again, none of that will work until
we prove it.
We as an audience prove it, that we're out there. We'll gobble it. We have, this is a big macro. The Philippine audience has the biggest opportunity to be one of the biggest audiences out there. There are 2 data points. One, for the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years or 7 years, in all of the data list of how many people in each country do online gaming, do social networking, do social apps, do TikTok, do Wattpad. Philippines is always in the top 5.
Yeah.
Regardless of our quote unquote third world status.
I believe Manila is the Instagram capital of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, look at our vlogger community.
Yeah.
If you know anything about YouTube, every year they have, those YouTube festivals in every country where they invite the top YouTubers and the YouTube king and queen of that country, and they do a big, live show with them all. The Philippines always is the best show. The best and biggest show. It's always the Philippines. Even topping Japan. Japan is this garage club. But the Philippines is MOA. So my point there is.
You said 2 data points.
Yeah. But see, my point there is that we are there, okay, in terms of capability. Other examples is whenever Pacquiao puts out a new shoe, not days, right? 1 or 2 hours, anytime there's any mass production of stuff, boom, it's out there. Look at how many franchises we were able to convince Funko to be able to do. Funko loves us because we're a major. So we're there already in improving. We don't have to convince the Filipino people to become an economic powerhouse. It's already there. It's just not focused anywhere.
I'll add one more data point to your data points. Crunchyroll, the anime streaming website, you can pay for it, but after a month of the content being there, it'll be free. Guess which country tops the list for the people who wait a month?
And they love that. And I don't know if you remember Pop Asia?
Yeah.
Remember, I was part of that team. And I don't know if everybody knows, but the producer, the money guy, the billionaire from Dubai, who funded it all, he is one of the top investors of all Marvel movies since Iron Man. So that's why he's able to bring actual actors to the Philippines. And that's why he was able to bring Disney, you remember Disney. And every year we had 10 minutes of sneak previews that nobody had ever seen. We were always the first audience to see it. And it was only because Disney trusted the Philippine audience. Okay. So that's one of the data points. It's there. Our sleeping tiger or dragon or whatever you want to, it's there. You don't have to train it. You don't have to you don't have to, educate it. It's just waiting for focus. And 2, not only do we love Filipino content, but we love and understand international content.
We love content.
We love content.
And it's just awesome if we're in there.
Yeah. Okay. And here's why that's important. Okay. Again, let's go back to my producer friend, MK of Dubai. Okay. He's a prince in Dubai, a billionaire family, right? He has a 17,000 square meter store, comic book store in Dubai. So it's the biggest retail comic store in the world, in his own mall, in his own stadium music hall. he brought in all of the plumbing and stuff. So he's invested in comics and entertainment. So you go, what the hell is he doing in the Philippines then? Why didn't he set up a big, huge show in Dubai? Dubai has all the money, but he says about only 25% of Emiratis know and understand comics or in American content. The Philippines knows that. And he knows that the Philippines knows that. So that's why he bets on the Philippines. Okay. So that's already set there. And we're ready to eat anything up. And so how do you focus it? Focus it in the form of international entertainment quality that is Pinoy.
Yeah.
Instant focus, instant together. Netflix is already waiting for that data. Hollywood is waiting for that data. I know of the year before the pandemic hit, November. I was in the Philippines. Again, I can't name names. I was the assistant. My friend was the producer. He was one of the line producers, you can say. He got approval from the producer, who got approval to do. He was basically shopping around a Lapu-Lapu screenplay.
Okay.
But a martial arts guy. He's my contact with all the martial artist guys. Okay. He got that going. He got a producer, he got a director, and he got Magellan, the actor. Then it was time for a year and a half looking for investment production company to invest in it. He got something interesting. One of the top five, not one of the new top five, but one of the top five that's been around since the 70s. Okay, so one of the major top five. And they go, you want to do it in the Philippines? All right, go to the Philippines, tell them we want to do it there. Tell them all we want is 40% rebate. You know, that's what New Zealand gives for Lord of the Rings. That's what UK gives for Star Wars and stuff like that, for all those major productions, Game of Thrones, everything. And they said, if you can come back with us with 40%, we'll do all the financing, and we'll bring the full production to the Philippines. This was what, 2.5 years ago? Nobody, and I talked to the top producers. They didn't understand what rebate meant. They thought it was money out of their pocket.
Oh, wow.
And I'm talking top five. They were going to bring all the fun. It wasn't, okay, 40%, and then the Philippines has to invest this much, and we'll only invest this much. Now they were going to bring everything in. And again, a top five company. And we just were not ready. That was my epiphany, that when Trese comes online, and then when Ronnie told me about his deal with Netflix, I'm going, oh shit. If they weren't ready for Lapu-Lapu 2.5 years ago, they're not ready for anything else coming up in the pipeline. And so we have to get ready. And that's why for the last 1.5 years, I've been talking to government and industry to hopefully push them to try to finally start to get ready. So now I Chair Lisa tells me from the Film Council that there now is 225% rebates.
Mm-hmm.
One for producing in the Philippines and one for using production in the Philippines. So it's not quite yet the 40 bound, but at least they went from 0 to double 25.
Yeah, to 225s.
Yeah. So again, as long as we're going, I can work with that. And so maybe I can get another lower production in or something, and then save the resurrection of the Lapu-Lapu with the top five for later on. But again, my point in telling that story is there's so much potential, there's so much. Hollywood is already interested. There's nobody to talk to.
That should be you then, right? That's the whole point.
Well, I'm a comic guy and I'll do what I can do.
Yeah.
I'm a comic guy and I'll do what I can do because it'll be
Put
fun.
people together, build those heroes up.
Yeah. Actually, I'm really one thing I can say is I'm really interested now in animation. Really, I'm not talking CGI. CGI is still like, I mean, you either have 300 million and you can do Avatar kind of CGI, or you have every other budget, anything below that 300 million, and you get at the best Star Wars, Clone Wars, bad, what's the new one? You and I put that, contrast that up to like, I don't know what you know about anime, but I think it was 2014, there was Your Name from Makoto.
Kimi no Nawa.
That's like, I mean, I study this stuff. I go back on Disney Plus, and the last massive thing that Disney did was Tarzan. And if you remember, Tarzan was state-of-the-art 2D Disney animation, but that's when they started to try to play around with digital tools. That's why if you remember in the trailer, Tarzan does this roll thing through these trees. Well, that was a digital tunnel, of matte paintings of trees and stuff. So that was them starting it in CGI. And then obviously, as everybody knows, then it transferred to Pixar. And Disney 2D died for a little while. And Japan then took it. So to me, Your Name is 2D, the top level 2D, especially background, but then using digital tools the way that even Disney did it back then. Where if you watch closely in Your Name, there's real sunset, there's real lighting, there's real flares, there's real atmosphere, and it's all digital thing. I know the Philippines can do that. They just been, since the 80s, just doing service. So they can only do what the job asks for. But I know a lot of independents that are dabbling in that stuff, and I can direct them into that vein. So imagine a Your Name atmosphere backgrounds that's Manila, Philippines, but instead of anime characters and anime storytelling, it's American comic book storytelling, but Filipino stories. That I think will grab both anime and American audiences. And I know the Philippines can do that.
Oh, we'll eat it up.
And the production will just go because, again, 800, one studio with 800 artists. Come on. Give me 6 months to train that. And I swear to you, it'll be an efficient machine after that.
Have you seen, because Your Name is such a great movie. Have you seen this Filipino couple who refilmed the trailer as part of their engagement video or something? I think.
Oh no.
I think it was their engagement video. Either that or they just did it for fun. And then there's another one that redrew the poster and then applied like old school Filipino comics copy to it. Ang iyong pangalan.
Well, look at the other side too, because again, my training of image is thinking about everything, the whole macro, not just a micro. Some of Hot Toys gets produced in the Philippines. Some of Funko gets produced in the Philippines. So we're not only talking about the feature product, we're talking about merchandise.
That's true.
We're talking about cosplay. We're talking about fabrication of costumes for live action. Look at Elodia and them. I mean, she's still one of the top fabricators out there. Well, her team,
Yeah.
The capability for the whole entertainment. I mean, one of the real, I don't know if you guys know this, one of the real main molds for image was what George Lucas was doing in Star Wars. If you remember the old stories, he traded in his directing rate for percentages of ancillaries, which is the legal term for merchandising. He said, give me those rights. And that's where he made a lot of the other money. And that's what Image followed after. Remember, I told you, we started seeing the kids getting into the product because they didn't want to wait 30 days. So let's give them something in between 30 days. And so not only is the Philippines ready for entertainment, but it's ready for the whole thing. And so imagine all of that shooting at the same time. Now, all of that can stay in the Philippines. It doesn't have to be parceled out. And if it stays in the Philippines, imagine what our creative economy would be like, right?
And therefore our economy.
And therefore our economy. Imagine that, and we could, again, because of our English and our familiarity and our love of international content, we could actually start to control all that. We can start to control all that eventually. Because if we're going to be producing and manufacturing it, we even have a one step on hot toys. Because yes, they probably have a good English staff right now, but going into the future, staff changing in and out, staff leaving to form their own companies, they're continually going to have that problem of that interface. That's our big step ahead of Japan and Korea. Korea, the government 20 years ago spent billions, but it took 20 years because they had to first learn English. Then they had to learn, what's a superhero? Philippines, you bring
We're already there.
Day one, you start day one. There's no buildup. See, it's all there. It just takes our version. Some people may say this, think this is a little racist, but it's real history. It has to take our version of the Jewish entertainment families that funded Hollywood. Though they understood entertainment before it was Hollywood. And they understood talking to building product for the masa, for the audience, the whole audience.
I'm really glad to hear you talking about the macro, because sometimes, as a fan, I talk to other fans and I deal with other fans, and it seems like fans a lot of the time believe that the way I'm a fan is the way everyone should be a fan, and like, how do you feel about that? The people who are like, oh yeah, that cosplayer clearly loves that character, but does she buy any comics? And because in my mind, I'm like, she clearly loves the character more than you do. Look at the costume she just made.
I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of my big rant macros. And I've always looked at entertainment as a tool. A lot of people look at entertainment as just throwaway stuff just to pass the time. I've always looked at it as a tool. And again, as per, like my story about how Stan, took the nerd label and made it popular today. I've always looked at it as a tool because America has always used entertainment. We've always understood the worth of heroes to shape ourselves. Heroes are not perfect people. Heroes are what we want to be. It's not who we are yet today. It's what we want to be. And after you run that enough, you then become that, okay? So one of the problems that we have in the Philippines is, like, look at the way we deal with the quote unquote colonial problem, okay? We've had 300 years of the Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And then 100 years of America, and a couple of years in between that of Japan. Now, we rightfully talk about colonial mentality, we rightfully talk about crab mentality, but I'll tell you, because believe it or not, those same issues are all a part of Southern Africa, Lagos, Nigeria, exact same thing. Other countries, exact same thing. But I tell you, Doi, there's a difference between us and them, and it's something that needs to be broken, okay? Crab mentality, how did that begin? Well, it began with Spanish Empire, and we don't have enough visual stories to show that because it was gruesome.
Mhm.
I mean, we've heard of the stories of samurais where if you look at them sideways, they are legally allowed to cut your head off on the spot. Well, that they didn't make that up. That was empire. That's how Spain was. That's why there are no more Chris's in the Philippines. That's why the first people to die were warriors. And you didn't even have to fight. As long as you carried a kris or a head axe, boom, you were gone. You know? So imagine 300 years of that, and you could kind of see where the crab mentality comes from, right? You know, when you study the revolutionary history, it's a very short history, and it's a history almost built on betrayal, right? People give other Filipinos giving up other Filipinos, right? And that, so you could, that tells you by the 1800s, it became a survival mechanism because empire was so brutal. Okay. So I can tell, so you can see where it comes from. But I can tell you for a fact, we still have a difference. Because in any other country, when they say crab mentality or colonialism, you know who they blame?
The
They blame
colonialists.
Spain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who do we blame?
Us.
We blame us. So think about that psychologically. If the problem is us, ay, hirap yun. Hirap ayusin yun. Laking-laking problema naman yun. Pero if it's...
Ganyan talaga.
Oh yeah, ganyan talaga. Pero if it's outside, if it's Spain, sila, or in the past, that's an easier problem to solve because it's not a everyday present problem. See, that's why we have to break that. And because I believe that is one of the big, I mean, I travel everywhere and I'm meeting Filipinos everywhere. And every time a non-Filipino comes in and goes, is Duterte really that bad? Who's the first one to stand up and say how bad it is and to continue to constantly say how bad? Now, I'm not saying somebody needs to stand up and say Duterte is great, but in any other country, everybody will go, yeah, you know, oh, like here in America. Yeah, you know, that Trump, I mean, he's, I mean, shit, man, you know, but, you know, we've had like, you know, Obama and we've had Kennedy and, you know, even Bush at the tail end, you know, he was, you know, we would always shift to defending ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the Philippines, right? You've ever seen those conversations? It's always, oh yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad. It's really bad. The Philippines, oh no, that's why I'm here. Oh no, no, it's bad. Our response is always bad. I mean, like, I laughed throughout the pandemic.
Hopelessness.
Where, yeah, the pandemic right now. Okay, what are your numbers? It's something like 25,000 deaths, right? Or 30,000 deaths?
Something around that, yeah. We had 14,000 cases the other day.
Okay, here in the US, it's 640,000 deaths and 100,000 new cases every day. But every time I point that out to a Filipino, they go, oh, pero, you know, it's like a desire to think negatively of the Philippines. You know, I'm not saying that there are no problems. I'm just saying in a world where there's 30,000 deaths and it's almost kind of contained to Manila and Cavite, as opposed to 630,000 deaths and it's the whole US, I think I feel safer there.
Especially if you can just get here and leave Manila and Cavite.
Yeah, no, that actually, that's one of my, I have a business partner who's been there 3 years, 3 times now, and she's going in October again. And I remember her first two times, it was the 14-day lockdown, but you could do 1 week in Manila and then do another week at your destination. And she would always go to Cebu, and she has a partner there who owns a big resort. So she spends the last 14 days, you know, the last week of the 14 days in a resort. So I'm Zooming her from her pool side suite and stuff. But again, it's weird. It takes a worldwide pandemic and everybody being tested the same way to see everybody's responses, to see that it's much more, it's less important the money and how clean and organized everything looks. It's much more important how people have your back, even if they don't know you. And that's something that's we're losing that. We have been losing that for a couple of decades now in the US. We used to always have our back. We used to, I even remember in the 60s as a young kid, where arguably it was a lot more prejudice, right? Because there was less awareness. Civil rights movement was starting to get somewhere. I never felt any of that. I never saw any of that. Now, my 14-year-old girl comes home crying every now and then saying, this lady was staring at us. I'd rather be in the Philippines, do you? It looks like we're trying in the Philippines. Here, it does not, like I said, they give you the swab and they say, oh yeah, push it to 1 inch. Is that an inch? Oh, that's good enough.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
I know when I was there, because the Philippines was not top of mind for people there back then. So instead of whenever I'd say I was Filipino, people would be like, what's that? And I think a couple of times I'm sorry to everyone out there. I know this is politically incorrect. I just said I was Native American. Because I was like, I don't want to deal with all the crap that's like, oh, so you're Asian and blah, blah, blah.
I was Japanese.
I get that too sometimes.
I got Japanese in Hawaii get special treatment. You get the first tables, you get the cut, they make you cut in line and stuff. And so that's actually why I wore boots, cowboy boots, because
Really?
that's a sign of, oh, well, maybe you got some money. And so I would always be forced into restaurants and stuff in Hawaii for that, because they thought I was Japanese.
Let me ask you my last question. Well, no, I have another question. When can we expect Stone to come back?
We're about to launch a Kickstarter. We've been gathering. I can't say specifics, but if you've been watching our socials, it's a confirmation. We've been gathering covers, and so we're about ready to launch a Kickstarter. And I can say that one of the ideas I had going in to do 2.0 is we're going to do a graphic novel, and so it's going to be a new story, extending the storyline. And one thing I wanted to do with it was I wanted it to become the whole thing as a macro. I wanted it to become a yellow book for Filipino artists, because there's so many of us now, in the comics industry. But I don't think yet the whole of the Philippines and the world knows that there's this massive talent base that are professionals. It's not a potential thing, there's so many. So we're working out deals where we can get the involvement, whether it's a pinup, whether it's a cover, whether it's a page here or there, where I want to use Stone not only as to relaunch the Stone IP, because I think there's potential to go into other media with it today, but also I want it to stand alone on itself as, oh yeah, here's Leinil. Oh yeah, here's so and so. Oh yeah, here's so and so. Oh, they're all Filipino. Oh wow. And I want like producers and other editors to be able to go, oh wow, look at this.
This guy's good.
Yeah, this guy's good, and this community is good.
Yeah.
And then again, hopefully to follow through with that, with announcements next year and the year after that with 1 or 2 studios.
It's very cool.
Because Hollywood and everybody, they want one place to call, make a phone call. And it's time for something to get everybody together.
The main character of Stone's name is Gerry Allen, so I'm gonna have to ask you about any fond memories of Gerry Alanguilan.
When I came to the Philippines, this was 1995. So this has already been there, done that in my carear. Okay, Image was already well on its way. Wildstorm was starting to make the deal with Warner's. Everything was, there. And on a personal note, I had no connections yet. I was just a young punk kid still. Jim just got married. Todd got married before that and stuff. And so I go, but I already was not feeling comfortable in the U.S. I remember the point. I have a best friend, and her mom. No, I think her auntie died, and so she invited me to the funeral. And by this time, I was a boy racer, so I had this juiced up black Eclipse, slammed down with Azev rims, and all stoked out, and my name and Wetworks plastered on it as if it was a Batmobile. As I drive into the parking lot of the funeral place, all these kids started following me. And they were all comic fans, and they were told I'm the X-Men guy, and I spent the whole time in the church, even paying my respects at the coffin, with kids and aunties trying to get autographs from me. And that's not the life I wanted, and so I ran away for a little while. I go, hey, I still have some friends in the Philippines because I went to high school there and I went to 2 years of college. I was the first batch of guys at PWU, Philippine Women's. And a lot of my friends were now art directors in advertising. So I had a little safe haven. So I came over there. A friend of mine let me use his condo behind San Miguel. It turned out it was the basement was a recording studio of Eat Bulaga, so we got to meet a lot of actors and actresses, and so I went there just to get away, and just to start my journey to start to learn Tagalog. Well, after 5 years, I got married, started having kids, built a studio, but I went there just to get away. And then the guy who owned the condo, and it was a massive, these are the old condos, not the new condos. These are old condos where there was only 2 units per floor, and so I was by myself in this massive unit. And he then, turns out, his son draws. His son was Nicky Manabat.
Okay.
And he goes, can I introduce you to Alamat? And so that's where I meet Budjette and everybody. That's where we get the papers done so that Nikki can go to the US, and blah, blah, blah. I do what I can to help Alamat. And of course, Gerry's there. And I remember them coming together with me to do one of Phil Bar's signings in Greenbelt. Remember, it was just that small. It's not, now it's Greenbelt 1 to 5 and something like that, yeah. Right? Yeah. Okay. Before it was just this slightly modern Palenque.
Greenbelt 1 looks exactly the same, and it's right beside all of these other new Greenbelts, but it hasn't changed at all.
Oh, really? Really? Okay. Okay. So anyway, so I was there, and I remember one of the breaks, it was just me and Gerry. And we already started the studio. And Gerry, I don't know if you know, I don't know if Gerry ever told you, he was my first art director. Because again, I didn't know Tagalog. So I leaned on him because they were all just kids, and he seemed like the oldest, especially with his hair at the time. He seemed like the oldest. And I remember we sat down and he told me a story, because again, I was just there for my personal reasons and just to get away. I actually had no plans on going back to the US to go back into comics, and so therefore I had no real plan to open up the studio, even though I did already. Gerry solidified it with this story he told me. He told me his own personal story that he'd always wanted to become a comic book artist and writer, and he's always been doing these indies. So he showed me Timawa and stuff, and I was floored by that double page spread and stuff. And then he got into the studio. He got into the studio as an inker, and I leaned on him as a director. And he told me that, Whilce, alam mo, before I came there, wala silang pag-asa at all. Kasi thousands and thousands of miles away US. And at the time, in the mid-90s, dial-up pa.
Yeah.
You know, so it was really a rich man's game, right? So walang hope, he said. And then he said that when Phil Bar brought me there, and they threw a party for me at Camp Crame, at this big hall, and they brought in all these rich people and a lot of fans, and we had that art contest where Nikki won. He said that once I showed up, and I was not that much older than them, and so I still looked, I could be one of them. And he said that was important. He said, when I arrived, looking the way I did and wanting to welcome them, wanting to be welcomed, wanting to be interested in them, he said, finally may pag-asa. And then so when Leinil got the job with X-Men, and they got their other jobs with Wildstorm, he said it was finally a bridge that they thought would never ever get built was now there. And that told me then too that I could leave, because I did leave in 2000, but the bridge is as strong as ever. It's there. Now I don't have to control that bridge. I don't have to maintain that bridge. I don't have to show people where that bridge is. Anybody now can find it. Anybody now can use it.
You're the bridge between them and the American comics industry. You're also the bridge between them and the previous generation of Filipino artists.
Yeah, because actually
you were the only one in the middle.
Yeah, because I was told that was a little bit different. It seems like we have this thing with balikbayans, right? Because Jose Rizal arguably was our first balikbayan. Right? Yeah. And I think what that really is having a different outlook when you come back. Because I was told a lot of stories of a lot of creatives when, you know, that were back home, and they had that, you know, that authoritarian model of how they had to act. Yeah. With underling, you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I was just in my mind, I was just a kid. I was just one of the kids with them, you know, and I was just being floored by, you know, what Gerry did and what Leinil did and what Edgar did and what Gilbert did and everybody. And I was going, oh, well, this is cool. Because another thing that you guys might not know is that Balete 55 was a family friend of ours. Not me personally, but my best friend, Ditko, who's the manager of Eli Bundia. She was friends with the medical family in Makati Med, who brought in the first CAT scans and MRIs. And this 1,000 square meter house and lot was theirs. And so it was a massive 2-wing structure. And I and my wife stayed in one wing. And in the other wing, we had the Big Brothers, the #2 dance group, boy group in the Philippines. We had a publishing house with Francis Reyes, my art director. We had actresses and actors stay in over every now and then downstairs next to the boys. We had mirrors all over the second living room. And so we had ABS and GMA, their dancers and stars practicing their numbers downstairs. Had a photo studio with Krusty, and we did a lot of the movie posters for ABS. And so it was this big entertainment hub, you know, combine, you know, collective. Very cool. And it was, and that's why I stayed for 5 years. I mean, that's why I never thought I mean, imagine having all this, you know, and going, well, are you going to go back to the US? You crazy? In the US, Jim and I and Rob and Todd, we talk to Wizard and try to put out that this is what our lifestyle is. I'm actually living this lifestyle in the Philippines. And Gerry again was the one who solidified all that for me. That there was a, it's great when you're, you know, from growing up in your teenage years, it's great when you're having fun, but to have fun and it actually could mean something,
It's the best.
it's the best, you know? You end up having no regrets, you know?
Nothing is better. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing is better, you know? I mean, like, one of my hopes in the future is to do a movie of the Balete days. I mean, I got stories of like Francis Magalona and Rico Blanco, that the River Maya staying over 2 nights in my condo, you know, I'm doing the Elvis. There's like, my first movie would be a movie about Club Dread and how that was the center of everything, of music though. But I would have rebrand Balete's 55 Studio as the center of bringing everything else together. Comics, publishing, fashion, NU, you know, was there all the time and stuff, and movie stars and stuff. And to see that it was all young guys, it was all young kids.
Yeah.
It was just so much energy. There's no way I would have left. No way I would have wanted to leave, because none of that existed in the US.
I don't think a lot of people realize it, especially in the US or something, because people will look at these different media as these, you know, musicians are one thing, Hollywood is another thing, comics are another thing. But over here, it's like there's this big giant overlap of all of the creatives. I'll tell you a story. You know, Hank the bartender in Trese.
Yeah.
Hank, I knew him. I thought I knew him as the bartender from Trese, but no, Hank owned the bar where I went to for my very first beer in 1997. Hank served me my very first beer, and I only knew that because when I did this roundtable with Hank and Budjette and Kajo, my brother saw it and was like, "Hey, that's Hank. We used to go to his bar all the time. He gave me a job," because my brother's a musician. He gave me a job, like several gigs. I'm like, the whole creative community in the Philippines is so tightly knit.
That's what I love about it, the interconnectivity of everything and how everybody wants to play. You know, like, you know, I know some of the bands too, and you know them. You know, the drummers are always switching. You know, Perf is always going from one band to another. You know, Sancho is behind the scenes everywhere, you know, and the directors, you know, seeing Roel Santiago go into audio then too and stuff. I love how it's connected, because that's how we've always done things in image. And that's one of the, and again, you can't do that in the US because of SAG, because of lawyers, because of this and that. But in the Philippines, you could be sitting down and going, dude, where are we going to get a song, man? We need a song for our movie. And then all of a sudden, someone will appear and he's connected to this or that. And then he goes, yeah, I know this. I know Morissette. Yeah, you think she'll be, yeah, she loves comics. And he goes, oh, yeah. You know, he's just pulling our leg. And then 2 hours later, he's called Morissette and she's come by. And that's like movie land. You know, things that can happen. But in the Philippines, it's everybody wants to look for something to do.
Exactly. It's awesome. Like, I don't know, people know this. Leinil is a musician. He plays a guitar for a band.
Marty McFly. Yeah.
It's so cool. So let me ask you something. I love comics about music. Like, one of my favorite comics ever is Bill Sienkiewicz drawing Jimi Hendrix, which is like, isn't that just like the most no-brainer pairing you can think of? If one Filipino band was going to have a comic made about them, either their story, you know, their story in music, or maybe interpretations of their music, of their lyrics, who would you pick?
That's tough, because I would have two. to keep along the Hendrix motif, I would really like to explore, because there's so many different levels to the real story, and I don't know, I haven't been exposed to all the different aspects of it, but I would really love to see what the real story of Wolfgang was, because I got to know them because they contributed a song to my Stone soundtrack and hung around with them a little bit. But I never thought we could get them on the album, because they were, to me, they were, you know, that level up there, you know, and they always seemed to me as the Conyo Boys, you know, and I now know they're not.
It's because Bastia looks the way he does.
Right. Well, even you know, what's his name, the guitar guy. I mean, you know, you know, he can switch back and forth. But see, the reason that's important for me is, as you know, in Alamat, you could have Budjette, who is from a well-to-do family, you could say, right, an entertainment family, and then you can have like Roy Allen Martinez, whose dad's a taxi driver. Edgar Tadeo from the lower class, then too. But they don't have those stupid fights when they're together, right? It's just about comics.
Yeah.
And it's just about capabilities. And so I'd love to see what that story, how that story panned out there. And then on the other hand, the real Pinoy story for me would be obviously the E-heads.
Yeah, of course.
Those first few albums where they wrote about the masa. I mean, it's hard to explain Aling Nena, you know? Right?
You can't.
You know, and especially the ending, right? Wala, wala, nothing happened. You know, in America, you always get the girl, right? You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, and one thing I also understand is almost all of the bands, because again, you know, buying a guitar and drums it's money, is even though they might look like they represent the lower class, they're all at least middle class, right? Right, Doi?
Yeah. They all at least have the money for the instruments, which is never cheap.
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, again, that is an interesting thing too, because I hung around River Maya a while because, again, I became friends with Chito Ronyo. And, you know, there I knew, okay, Bamboo, the Balikbayan, who's not yet still really comfortable with the Philippines.
Yeah.
You know, Rico, you know, he's playing the clown, but I see gears spinning in his head, you know, and you know, the other two who were like, to me, they were like the musicians, you know. I love, he's gonna kill me, but I love the bassist guy. Me and Day always looked at him as like, he is that, you know, Pinoy astig guy, just in the music. He's just in the music. And then the drummer was, I mean, poster boy for Konya. but the nice, you know, the kid that's just, you know, friends with everybody. That's another thing I loved about when we're talking about, you know, all the groups together, and everybody intertwined. It's even brought to the US, because almost all the creatives I ever meet, the conversation always somehow gets around to, hey, do you know Dino? Dino Ignacio, yeah. Everybody knows Dino. You know, there's so many. That's another bigger story.
Yeah.
We know how, we are people, you know, and we can get along even with people that we maybe shouldn't like. You know, we just want to have a good time. We just want to enjoy and get the job done, but, you know, just enjoy. And so, yeah, I would do Wolfgang and the E-heads. There are other bands that I think, I mean, there's so many stories, you know, like I think Barbie is a very, very interesting story. I met her a long time ago at Sony, and because I've seen so many models of story like that, like Veronica, Victoria, and there were a couple other female bands that were kind of wavering around pop, but they had things to say, and then about their treatment, and I mean, there's just so much to say, and it's all there, and it's all under this pile of talent that people aren't exposed. I mean, like, you look at Francis M, and he is Conyo salesman. He is the guy you are told to, he could rip you off and sell you a bridge in
yet,
anywhere. And yet he has the heart of gold, and he can get everything done. But he is a wild man too.
Here's my last question. And this is just to appease my own curiosity. I remember around 20 years ago on the internet, one of the image founders, I think it was Eric Larson, I can't say for sure, posting a story. So I actually don't remember if this actually happened. So I'm just going to ask you if this actually happened. Posting a story about how all of you guys, the image founders, sat down once together and discussed who the best artist among you was. Did this actually happen?
No, but well, it might have happened in a smaller group. But if you're asking everybody, no. But I can give you another story that did happen. I think Blade just came out, with what's his name?
Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes, and I think Batman had already come out, and so Wesley Snipes, bald head, Fifth Element.
I'm not good with that today. Let's look that up.
He married Demi Moore back then. Willis.
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis. So Wesley, Bruce Willis, Demi Moore, and somebody else. We got a call from CAA, the top agency in Hollywood, that those four clients wanted franchises. And so they wanted us to sign up with CAA. And so they sent the limo down to pick us up to bring us to LA. So we all pile into the limo, and we're kids. And so, of course, we drive through Jack in the Box.
Of course.
While we're driving through Jack in the Box in a long stretch limo, Jim starts pulling out the cigars, and we had this morbid conversation of how long is this all going to last? And we all agreed 3 years. And 3 years later, the downturn started to happen. We survived it all, but I know for sure that conversation happened.
Okay.
I don't know if we would. I know I wouldn't have been comfortable with that conversation that you asked, because when we got into the game, when we first formed up, it obviously was this hierarchy that, okay, Jim and I and Mark, we're X-Men, alumni. So of course we're better. And, Rob is just this kid, and he's doing these characters that nobody it was popular at the time, but I mean, it was nothing compared to the X-Men and Todd Spider-Man,
Yeah.
and Valentino doing Hawk and Dove, right? Or
he's doing Guardians of the Galaxy at the time.
Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah. So if that question was ever asked, it must have been a drunken question from maybe Todd.
Okay.
Because Todd never asked questions where you could answer, oh, Todd's the lower end of that. He's smart. Todd is Todd because he is Todd. He was aware before any of us were.
Okay. because that story that I remember, and again, I don't know if I'm making it up, said that said that the that you all agreed it was Mark Silvestri.
I would agree with that.
Really? You think
Yeah.
Mark is the best out of all of you, like in terms of being a draftsman?
Yeah, and especially if you look at it collectively, like look at his X-Men, which made his name. It made all our names. And then look into Cyberforce as it started, and now look at what he's doing now on his own. Of all of us, you can see the progression, and it's not a progression of an amateur to a professional. It's a professional to an ultra professional. And on his own. I mean, Jim still has Scott. You don't pay top dollar for Jim to ink.
Yeah.
You pay top dollar for Scott's ink on Jim. But Mark.
It's that specific combination.
Yeah. But Mark is his own artist now, and he's had some of the top inkers on him, but his stuff now by himself is miles ahead of that. And he's always been, me and Mark have always been in that lane, but I've been in that lane, but as a technical guy too, as a production guy too, because I'm a computer nerd too. But Mark is always the artist guy. He was always the guy going to do a little bit better. His anatomy was always top notch. His women were always perfect, So yeah, I would, if that conversation had, I would have agreed that it was Mark. But I see, like, Mark is a nice guy, so I don't see Mark asking that question.
He would never say that himself, would he?
Right. No, Rob would never ask that, because that he knows that opens it up to, he knows how many people don't like his stuff.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't ask that. Eric wouldn't ask that, because I just want to draw. He's always seen him as just the indie guy. That's it. He didn't care if he got $1 million or not. Valentino, I think, always arguably knew he wasn't on our level artistically.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, he's balikbayan, but he has enough Korean in him that, well, Jim is the kind of guy.
Too polite to ask that.
Yeah. Jim is the kind of guy that would maneuver somebody else to ask that question and answer it with Jim, so he doesn't have to say anything. He'll just snicker.
So the only person who could have asked that would have been Todd.
Yeah. It only would be because then at that time he had his own studio by himself. He didn't bring other people. He had his toys were already successful. So even if you were one of the odd cards and said that no, Mark's better, he could bring up all this other stuff. So he could argue through it. And if you ever talk to Todd is like that. Todd's, what's your favorite ice cream? 4 hours later, he's still describing his favorite ice cream. And if you don't say anything in his pause, he will continue to talk. So yeah, Todd might have asked that, but I don't think strategically he would.
Yeah. So maybe you were just drunk. I don't know. Or maybe the story didn't happen.
Well, there were very few, we didn't know each other when we started.
Yeah.
So before that, we didn't hang out. And when it did start, there was no time to hang out.
Oh, cool.
There was only time to do meetings.
Yeah.
And those were rare and in between, mostly on fax machines.
I remember as a kid, I would get into arguments with my friends about which who among you guys was better. And financially, I mean, there's no question, it's either Todd or Jim. But then most people would say Jim, but then I would say something like, I get why you're saying Jim, but like if Mark or Jim were to draw somebody sitting, Mark would draw somebody sitting and Jim would draw somebody like he was posing to sit. And I think that's the difference. It's like seeing very young George Perez and later George Perez.
No, you're correct. Mark is, like I said earlier, was always artistic. He would always think in art terms. Okay, Jim has always been analytical. Like when we were doing The Punisher, one of the last skills that Jim attained or mastered, and it was only I think the middle period of Wildcats that he mastered was shading. Okay. But here we were starting on Punisher, where they demanded shadows, right? And so I remember having a conversation with Jim where I was the art guy. I would go, okay, it's really important to see this eye, but I don't really need to see this eye. So let me put a light real close to this eye, and then let me see where the shadows go from there. And then I would just work it through. Jim goes, no, there's number one, so that you have there's number two, so you have the Neil Adams thing. You have number three, so you have the Bernie Wrightson shadow of the nose. He had it all in a formula.
Yeah.
And so I remember another conversation where he's doing I think it was a Punisher close-up of a cover for a cover, and he goes, and I remember him saying something like, "Oh yeah, wait a minute, I did a close-up 4 issues ago, and that was using number 2, so I'll use 4 now." He's Ivy League. He went to Ivy League school, so he's very, very analytical.
So he's cerebral about his art.
He's cerebral, yeah.
Okay. Somebody like Todd doesn't strike me as cerebral about his art.
Todd is an interesting thing. Todd is, it took me a little while to figure Todd out. Todd is, the biggest clue for Todd is Greg Capullo.
Okay.
So Greg comes on and he does Spawn for years.
Yeah. Even Todd admits Greg is a better artist than him.
Yeah. But with Todd inking, right?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And then years go by and nothing's happening. And then I get out of my contract with DC, and my best friend Brian Haberlin is now running Spawn. And so he brings me in, okay, and gets me a contract. And so now I'm doing it. And Todd did this subtle thing for the first few weeks. Oh, Whilce, you don't really have to draw everything, don't worry about detail, just get stuff done in. Your shadows are great. Just do your shadows, just do quick stuff. I didn't realize what he was saying. What he was saying was, give me a layout. So just like Greg, I could embellish it.
Oh.
And it only made sense because at that time I was getting to know Greg, because he was starting to come back into the thing, and him and his wife didn't know the convention scene, and my wife knew the convention scene. So my wife introduced him to a lot of producers, so we hung out. And I was surprised when Greg started doing commissions, and in my mind, I'm thinking Spawn. And then I'm looking at his commissions, I'm going, oh, this is kind of simple compared to Spawn, right? It's solid, real rock solid, but it's simple. It doesn't have the blemishment that Todd, And then I start seeing Todd doing more and more of my covers and more of my pages. I actually have those first 2 issues where they're only pencils. He scanned the pencils and then inked them.
Yeah.
And published it that way. And so I started watching, and through the years after that, I figured it out. Very early on, when Greg came on board, Todd's problem is he has it's his weakness is doing a layout. He can do a layout, but it takes him too long. So when he finds Greg, who draws kind of like him and the structure just like his, it's like instant layout. I know where I can go with this. And so if you look at post Capullo, that's it. It's Todd inking over everybody, trying to find the next match.
I got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I believe we've gone 2 hours over time, and I saw that off-screen interaction you had just a few minutes ago. So I'm gonna let you go. This was amazing. I can't wait to talk to you again.
Yes. No. Hopefully, I'll be able to say some things, because let me tell you, real quickly. One of the things that really helped Image out was, again, remember we have 4 weeks, 30 days in between. One of the things that, if you remember, really helped us out was Wizard magazine. We had We had weekly conversations with them. You know, if they had some blank pages and they needed some content, we would make up something for them. If we were falling behind on some things, we would get pages from him and say, let's announce a contest. Let's announce a prize. Let's announce, sleight of hand, but again, our voice out there in between, instead of 30 days of nothing and then bad news, right? So if some of the stuff that I'm playing around with some people really work out, that's going to be, I'm gonna be counting on you, Doy. I'm gonna be counting you and a lot of other people, because again, I can make the best product, but if nobody knows about it, I'm gonna need word of mouth.
I'm here happily.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Whilce Portacio. This was amazing.
All right.
Thank you.